But speaking of acting as protector for Ziyan's ascension, this was no simple matter. Her enemies were absurdly powerful. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been forced into suicide in her past life, only to return again in this one. My Live Forever flower is still in young Master Su's hands, Ziyan said with a faint smile. Would you be so kind as to return it to me? Earlier, on the Azure Dragon altar, the item Su Zimo demanded from the Azure Dragon was precisely this Live Forever flower. For Ziyan, as someone reborn from a previous life, this flower was her most precious treasure, the key to reclaiming her former peak. Su Zimo slowly drew out the turquoise sphere of light. He knew that Ziyan had let him take the treasure partly to test him. She hadn't truly feared losing it, because the flower was already marked by her imprint. Anyone who tried to seize it by force would find it costly and troublesome. Tell me, Su Zimo said, who exactly are your enemies? I'll need to be prepared. The Heavenly Court, Ziyan answered, meeting his gaze word by word. She knew Su Zimo was of demonic blood. That meant they shared a common enemy. And since each sought something from the other, that was precisely why she dared to approach him. I'm curious, Su Zimo said with a smirk. The Heavenly Court is proud beyond belief. They don't usually bother with ordinary people. What did you do that made them chase you even 1,000 years later? It's a long story, Ziyan said with a helpless smile. When I first rose to prominence, every great power tried to recruit me. The Heavenly Court sent envoys as well. But I was proud back then. I refused them all. I was on the verge of breaking through to Saint Sovereign, but when my comprehension of primal Daos faltered, I was left with a hidden injury. So I went to the Paradise of Gods. She laughed dryly as she said it. The Paradise of Gods, Su Zimo mused. That's the Heavenly Court's medicinal garden, isn't it? Exactly. I intended to take a stalk of tenfold evolving silkworm dragongrass. To take it or to steal it? Su Zimo asked. Heavenly treasures belong to the world, Ziyan said calmly. Anyone has the right to obtain them. Taking or stealing makes no difference. I did get the silkworm dragongrass, she continued, but that also made me the Heavenly Court's enemy. They hunted me endlessly, until I was forced to take my own life. But they didn't know you'd prepared another way, Su Zimo said, picking up the thread of her story. You reincarnated, crossing from the future to be reborn again. It wasn't exactly a plan. Ziyan shook her head. It was a fortuitous part of my cultivation that happened to save me. I don't fear the Heavenly Court, Su Zimo said, but if their main forces have entered the God-fiend Abyss Heaven, are you sure this is the right time to attempt a Sage Monarch breakthrough? Previously, the Heavenly Court's presence in the God-fiend Abyss Heaven had been minor, their true elites stationed elsewhere. But now, with their campaign to annihilate the ancient demon realm, most of their strength was here. Attempting a breakthrough now seemed unwise. I have my own arrangements, Ziyan replied evenly. Even without your help, I still have backup plans. But working together simply makes things safer. I could guard your ascension, Su Zimo said. But before we cooperate, how do I know you really possess knowledge of the wind god's legacy? Ziyan waved her right hand. A strand of wind swirled in her palm. It was no ordinary breeze. Within it, worlds seemed to form. Beasts galloped through unseen plains. Birds sang in unseen forests. The lushness of ancient trees breathed with life. It wasn't just an illusion. It was the very fabric of creation. Within that current flowed the laws of the Tao itself, traces of primordial edict power that ordinary cultivators could never touch. To grasp even a fragment of such law was a miracle of ages. In all the heavens, Ziyan said with quiet confidence, none has ever surpassed my ancestors' understanding of wind. The 9 ancient gods were those who sought the Tao in the primordial age, when cultivation was still chaos, with no paths, no realms, no precedent. They were the pioneers who carved out the road itself. That was the greatness of the ancient gods. And the wind in Ziyan's hand was proof enough. No one but Tianwu, the wind god, could wield wind in such a way. Very well, Su Zimo said, nodding. I believe you. When will you attempt the breakthrough? Tomorrow night, Come to the Violet Mist Holy Lands, Ziyan replied. Before I begin, I can grant you half the inheritance. Once I succeed safely, you'll receive the rest. Agreed, Su Zimo said. As he watched Ziyan and He Changkong's figures fade into the distance, Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and leaned back in the pavilion. My lord, do you truly intend to cooperate with her? The ancestral warden asked beside him. Do you think she really trusts me? Su Zimo countered. Well, the ancestral warden hesitated. The two had only just met. Trust seemed out of the question. It's just a transaction, Su Zimo said. No need to overthink it. Ancestral warden nodded silently. They left the Azure Dragon altar and departed Skywind City that same day, heading toward the Violet Mist Holy Lands. The Violet Mist Holy Lands lay to the north of the city, not far, since after its decline it ruled only the surrounding 100,000 miles. It was said that in its prime, the sect had founded an entire empire, with thousands of sects and small nations under its banner. Traveling through the night, they arrived by dawn. The Holy Land sat deep within a forest. Among the lush trees, a faint glow of multicolored light shimmered. At this hour, as the first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon, the world's first ray of sunlight shone upon the land, illuminating the Holy Land in a divine radiance. Ziyan seemed to have arranged everything in advance. When the two arrived, He Changkong was already there to greet them. The saintess is in seclusion, preparing herself, He Changkong said. Do you wish to enter now? You were waiting for us? Su Zimo asked. No. He Changkong shook his head. I'm waiting for the people from the ancient Samsara god realm. During her breakthrough, aside from the heavenly court, we can't afford any other distractions. He had killed Meng Luanhui earlier on the Azure Dragon altar. The ancient Samsara god realm would not take that lightly. Seems your Violet Mist Holy Lands has been holding back for a long time, Su Zimo remarked. If we're going to make our move, we might as well make the entire God-fiend Abyss Heaven tremble, He Changkong said with a cruel grin. In that case, there's no rush. I'll stay to watch the show, Su Zimo chuckled. He waved his right hand, and the branches of nearby ancient trees wove together into the shape of a seat. He sat down comfortably beside He Changkong, waiting for the arrival of the ancient Samsara god realm. After some thought, the ancestral warden asked, Can your Violet Mist Holy Lands really stand against them? The ancient Samsara god realm possessed not one, but two saint sovereigns. Their first saint sovereign, the boundless saint sovereign, had vanished 10,000 years ago, but the foundation he left behind was still formidable beyond measure. The Violet Mist Holy Lands, by contrast, had produced no other saint sovereigns other than its founder, the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign, and its current strength fell short by an unbridgeable gulf. In the face of true power, what use is mere foundation, He Changkong said calmly. To my knowledge, the ancestral warden said, the first saint sovereign of the ancient Samsara god realm may have disappeared, but the second, Samsara saint sovereign, still resides within their sect. And that man is an eternal overlord. Among the 5 realms of the saint sovereigns, supreme giant, chaos primordial, eternal overlord, creation god, and sage monarch, an eternal overlord stood at the very pinnacle of the mortal path. Mere chickens and dogs, He Changkong said dismissively. Ancestral warden studied him again. There was no visible aura around He Changkong. Nothing that revealed vast power. At most, he seemed like a grand emperor. Could I be blind? The ancestral warden wondered silently. Unless the ancient Violet Mist Saint Sovereign had somehow returned to life, he couldn't fathom what gave the Holy Land the courage to defy the ancient Samsara god realm. Just watch the show, Su Zimo said with a faint smile. Your questions will answer themselves soon enough. He leaned back in the seat woven from ancient tree branches, eyes half closed, and spread his divine sense across 10 million miles. The pale light of dawn began to fade beneath a wash of violet radiance. The purple glow thickened, pushing back the last shreds of darkness. Within that glow, a golden sun began to rise. Su Zimo opened his eyes slowly and murmured, They're here. The ancient Samsara god realm? The ancestral warden asked. Even as he spoke, a black speck appeared in the sky. In the next instant, the speck crossed the horizon and loomed above them. It was a gigantic demonic beast, its body much like a black horse, but with no ears and two sharp black horns instead. Crimson light pulsed along its hide, and its tangled tail flared wildly, like the dance of 100 ancient demons. Its face resembled a dragon's, covered in scales, and upon its back it carried a mountain, steep, heavy, and alive with the sound of tumbling stones. The mountain of Samsara, the ancestral warden said, a treasure refined by the boundless saint sovereign in ages past. Not quite among the grand thousand treasures, but its balance of attack and defense makes countless cultivators covet it. Looks like the ancient Samsara god realm came here determined to erase the violet mist holy lands. Where the mountain of Samsara appeared, a saint sovereign could not be far behind. To pull up the roots, the saint had better come, He Chong Kong said indifferently. Saves me a trip. The monstrous steed drew close to the Holy Land and opened its colossal jaws. The maw was a black abyss, an endless pit that belched forth the flames of hell itself. With a thunderous boom, infernal fire poured from its mouth, spreading across the heavens, burning so hot that even the firmament seemed to melt. Hell horse, He Chong Kong said lazily. He flicked his finger once. A single flick sent a ray of light soaring skyward. It exploded in the air like a falling meteor, scattering into countless streaks that rained down upon the beast. Though the hell horse twisted and dodged, the storm of light was too dense. In the end, the barrage struck home. The beast let out a mournful cry and fell from the heavens. Seeing this, a presence within the mountain of Samsara let out a sharp, displeased snort. Just that single sound made the world tremble. The earth cracked open in a web of fissures, and countless ancient trees collapsed. The power of a saint sovereign, it was enough to shake the heavens. So this is how the violet mist holy lands welcomes guests? From the mountain of Samsara stepped a man, 8 feet tall, robed in the black and white vestments of the Samsara god realm. His temples were streaked with gray, and his long robes fluttered in the lingering flames. The realm lord of the ancient Samsara god realm, world-weary immortal. The ancestral warden murmured, narrowing his eyes. The name sounded strange to anyone hearing it for the first time, but it carried a story. World-weary immortal had earned his title for his disdain toward all worldly things. He was said to have inherited the legacy of the world-weary saint sovereign himself. It was widely believed that among all the God Realm's disciples, he was the one most likely to ascend to sainthood. World-weary immortal, He Chong Kong said evenly. You're not the one I'm waiting for. Tell the man behind you to show himself. A mere city lord of Skywind dares kill my domain's holy son, and still speaks so arrogantly? Who gave you that courage? World-weary immortal's voice cracked like thunder. Clearly, the God Realm had investigated the incident and learned everything in a short time. I said, He Chong Kong replied, voice flat. Bring out the one behind you. Otherwise, I'll shatter this mountain of yours. Courting death, world-weary immortal roared. Spirit power erupted from his body as he thrust his hand toward He Chong Kong. A sharp bang rang out. World-weary immortal was suddenly sent flying, slapped aside by an unseen force. The strike had come so fast that no one had seen it thrown. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes now burning with fury and shock. According to his investigation, this so-called city lord was no great power. Cautious man, unremarkable in strength. But this was beyond comprehension. Care to try again? He Chong Kong asked lightly. You're asking for death, world-weary immortal spat. Since becoming realm lord of the ancient Samsara god realm, he had rarely encountered anyone who dared to defy him. Years of dominance had ingrained arrogance deep into his bones. As he spoke, he pulled from his robes a short, sinister rope radiating malice. It was only a meter long, yet along its length floated dozens of twisted, ghostly faces, each one a remnant of slaughter and agony. This was no ordinary weapon, it was born of massacre and steeped in blood. The world-weary rope, world-weary immortal said grimly. It has slaughtered countless kingdoms. Today, it will end your violet mist holy lands once and for all. Looking at it was like seeing mountains of corpses and seas of blood, an artifact of pure calamity. A fine weapon, He Changkong said. If it were wielded by the world-weary Saint Sovereign himself, I might have to fight seriously. But you, he smiled faintly, eyes full of disdain. You're not worthy. Arrogant fool, world-weary immortal roared. When I refine this land and everything upon it, we'll see how long your arrogance lasts. He hurled the rope into the sky. The world-weary rope vanished as it flew upward, melting into the heavens as though absorbed by the sky itself. Heh! World-weary immortal exhaled sharply, forming seals with both hands as he chanted under his breath. Above them, the sky began to change. The serene blue firmament turned blood-red. The blood-red sky churned violently as winds howled and clouds twisted together, forming an enormous vortex that devoured everything in its reach. The surrounding spirit energy surged toward it like a tidal wave, pouring endlessly into that spinning abyss. In the forest surrounding the violet mist holy lands, colossal ancient trees were torn from the ground, as though the entire world were being refined within that vortex. Even the ancestral warden felt the immense pull, a devouring force that seemed intent on swallowing him whole. He Changkong snorted coldly. He raised his hand, and a surge of sword intent erupted skyward. From deep within the violet mist holy lands, a streak of flowing light shot out. It blazed like dawn's first glow, scattering darkness across the land. As the radiance grew clearer, it revealed the form of a longbow. The bow's body was forged from golden material, curved like a crescent moon, its frame aflame with divine brilliance, and its bowstring stretched 10,000 feet long. He Changkong gripped the bow with one hand, turned his body half a circle, and drew it back in a smooth motion. The bow required no guidance from him. When he pulled the string, the power of heaven and earth converged upon it, naturally forming a radiant arrow of pure light. "What is that?" the ancestral warden asked, narrowing his eyes as he felt the overwhelming force emanating from the weapon. "It's merely the violet dawn godlight," Su Zimo replied casually. Although he had not fully integrated the memories of the Infernal Lord, he had already absorbed part of them. Those memories were vast, far more than a single lifetime's worth. Each generation of the Infernal Lord inherited not only his predecessors' memories, but also the recollections of all Infernal Lords before them. In other words, however many times the Infernal Lord had reincarnated, so many lives and experiences were now etched within that collective memory. If Su Zimo were one day to fall to heaven's will, like his predecessors before him, he too would pass his memories, his entire existence, on to the next Infernal Lord. It was an obsession, eternal and indestructible. "The violet dawn godlight?" the ancestral warden repeated softly. He was no more than a grand emperor. His knowledge was broad but not limitless. Yet this was something he had never even heard of. "There are two supreme essences born from the sun," Su Zimo explained idly. "One is the true sun god flame. The other is the violet dawn godlight. This bow was forged from condensed violet dawn godlight, combined with countless rare materials. It may not rank among the grand thousand treasures, but in truth, it surpasses them." At those words, the ancestral warden's eyes widened slightly. The grand thousand treasures were the most direct measure of artifact hierarchy across the 9 heavens. Of course, that list was not immutable. Whenever a peerless treasure was forged, the rankings would be revised. For countless cultivators, having their weapon listed among the grand thousand treasures was the highest honor, a glory that spread their name across all realms. But people like He Changkong cared little for such recognition. The longbow curved like a serpent, and the violet dawn godlight shone once more. Suddenly, within the blood-red void that had been slowly refining the world, an explosion of pure radiance tore through the sky. The beam shot into the vortex overhead. First, nothing happened. Then the void began to crack apart. The devouring vortex shattered into fragments. The heavens burned with an unnameable fire, and the source of that fire was the world-weary rope itself. What did you do?" World-weary Immortal shouted in panic. He tried to summon the rope back, but the connection between his spirit and the weapon had already been severed. "I told you," He Chong Kong said calmly. "You're not qualified to fight me. Have your master come out." His gaze didn't linger on world-weary Immortal for even a moment. The man was nothing more than an insect in his eyes, unworthy of attention. He stared instead at the mountain of samsara. When it remained still, a faint smile appeared on his lips. "If you refuse to come out," he said, "then I'll strike until you do." As soon as he finished speaking, the longbow in his hand gleamed once more. The violet dawn godlight condensed into form again. A brilliant flash burst forth. World-weary Immortal didn't even have time to react before he was blasted away. The mountain of samsara shook violently, followed by an explosion that shook the heavens. The ground split open, leaving behind a vast, bottomless crater. Then a cold, thunderous snort resounded through the world. The sound alone was enough to make the hearts of all who heard it tremble. He Chong Kong himself staggered back several steps under its force. As the dust settled, the great mountain trembled on the verge of collapse. From within the ruin, an ancient figure slowly emerged. In that instant, the world fell into silence. The man's presence seemed to traverse countless epochs. His eyes alone carried the weight of endless reincarnations. "A mayfly shaking a tree, merely an ant," the figure said softly. He Chong Kong narrowed his eyes, staring intently at the man who had stepped forth. It was a tall man in a simple robe. There was no overwhelming aura about him, only the quiet, infinite flow of reincarnation encircling his form. Each step he took seemed to make the heavens themselves cycle, the sun and moon reversed, and the cosmos trembled. His ancient robe draped over his broad frame, long hair drifting behind him. On his back was a massive millstone, its surface weathered by the passage of ages, as though it had always been part of him. "The Samsara Saint Sovereign," the ancestral warden said, enunciating each word. Even though he was born of the ancient demon realm, he knew full well the strength of this man. Aside from the two ancestral infernal archons, there was almost no one in existence who could rival the Samsara Saint Sovereign. It was a bitter truth for the ancient demons. In all the endless eons, even a pig could cultivate itself to sainthood. Yet their own saint sovereigns never lived long. Had they survived through the ages, the accumulated might of the ancient demon realm would have been unimaginable. The more the ancestral warden thought about it, the deeper his resentment toward the heavenly court and high heaven itself grew. When he had been part of the system, he had never questioned it. But now, seeing from the outside, he realized the ancient demons' tragic fate. They were livestock bred for slaughter, nothing more. "Don't get worked up," Su Zimo said with a smile. "This is the Violet Mist Holy Land's business, not ours." "Does the Lord think He Chong Kong can win?" the ancestral warden asked softly. In truth, he didn't believe the man stood a chance. "Death," Su Zimo said, smiling faintly, "is not always the only way." He clearly knew something but kept it to himself. The ancestral warden didn't dare to pry, so he remained silently watching. Before the Violet Mist Holy Lands, the Samsara Saint Sovereign regarded He Chong Kong with cold detachment. "Not just you," he said. "Even if your Violet Mist Saint Sovereign himself were resurrected, he would not dare be so insolent before me, boy." Between Saint Sovereigns, fear did not exist. Seeing He Chong Kong remain silent, the Samsara Saint Sovereign continued, "Do not say I bully the younger generation. I'll give you the first strike." "Who said I intended to fight you?" He Chong Kong said with a faint laugh. "You killed the holy son of my ancient Samsara god realm," the Saint Sovereign said coldly. "That is not something you can simply walk away from. If this were merely a dispute among juniors, it would be one thing, but you insult the very honor of my god realm. Do you think we have no one left?" "No," He Chong Kong replied, shaking his head. "You misunderstand. I only want you to stay quiet for a while. When the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign is resurrected, he will fight you himself. Upon hearing He Changkong's words, the Samsara Saint Sovereign's eyes narrowed. Are you joking? A man who has been dead for 10,000 years. How could he possibly be resurrected? That's not something you need to concern yourself with, He Changkong replied calmly. I'm afraid that's impossible, the Samsara Saint Sovereign said coldly. Before the violet mist Saint Sovereign ever rises again, I'll destroy your violet mist holy lands. If he wishes to settle accounts afterward, I'll be waiting. That's not up to you. He Changkong shook his head. He raised his hand, and a surge of invisible power rippled through the air. The surrounding void solidified, the Tao itself collapsing under its weight. Across the entire territory of the violet mist holy lands, a vast divine cage descended from the heavens. Upon that cage, divine visions appeared, dragons coiled and thrashed their tails, phoenixes cried out in harmony, and the aura of endless reincarnation flowed across its surface. It was a single cage, yet filled with such celestial phenomena that even the most jaded observer would be left in awe. At the moment it appeared, even the mighty Samsara Saint Sovereign's expression changed. He tried to flee. The primal Taos around him flared to life, and the space that had been frozen a moment ago shattered as he broke free. He ripped open the void before him with a single hand, abandoning even the Samsara mountain behind, desperate to escape. He Changkong never moved to stop him. He only watched, smiling faintly. It's useless, he said. If you were still within your ancient Samsara god realm, I might not be able to touch you. But here, within the lands of the violet mist holy lands, I am God. As his words fell, the celestial cage above came crashing down from the sky, locking onto the Samsara Saint Sovereign. The Saint Sovereign tried to teleport away, traversing millions of miles in an instant, but no matter how far he fled, the cage enveloped him once more. With a deafening boom, the earth shook violently as the cage slammed down before the violet mist holy lands. Inside, waves of Samsara power erupted, battering against the prison from within in an unending assault. Don't bother struggling, He Changkong said confidently. This cage is forged from the iron of the river of time. Unless you can truly enter that river, you'll never break free. That's hardly difficult, the Samsara Saint Sovereign replied evenly. Once I comprehend the essence of this iron of time, I'll emerge easily enough. It's just metal, not the true river of time itself. I don't intend to keep you imprisoned for long, He Changkong said softly, glancing toward the depths of the violet mist holy lands. By the time you figure it out, he should already be revived. You violet mist people came well prepared, the Saint Sovereign said with a faint smirk. You even built such a thing for me. But when I emerge, it will mark the destruction of your holy land. Though trapped, he showed no sign of panic. At his level, even death was no end. His essence and soul could be reborn. The iron of the river of time might bind him for now, but it was also a rare opportunity, a chance to comprehend its mysteries. This wasn't made for you, He Changkong said coldly. Only Su Zimo understood. This iron of the river of time had been forged to imprison the heavenly court itself. It was clear that the revival of the violet mist Saint Sovereign had been planned long ago. After speaking, the Samsara Saint Sovereign closed his eyes, ignoring He Changkong entirely. He sat cross-legged within the cage, beginning his meditation on the iron of time. As for world-weary immortal, he had already fled long ago, escaping with the Samsara mountain. With even his ancestral elder imprisoned, he didn't dare remain for a moment longer. City Lord your methods are impressive, the ancestral warden remarked in awe. Just minor tricks, He Changkong said with a calm smile. Our saintess has been waiting for some time. Please, both of you follow me. He led the way, with Su Zimo and the ancestral warden close behind as they entered the depths of the violet mist holy lands. From the outside, the holy land shimmered with radiant clouds and divine light. It seemed sacred, majestic. But within, it appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary forest. The only difference was that every plant and tree exuded Tao rhythm, their vitality overflowing, their growth exuberant. This place, the ancestral warden murmured, scanning the surroundings, his mind deep in thought. Finally, He Changkong halted before an ancient gate. In the midst of the lush forest, the sudden appearance of the portal felt out of place, even surreal. He placed his right hand gently against its surface. A muffled boom echoed. The gate vanished, and in its place stood a colossal tree, stretching thousands of miles into the sky, its crown lost to the clouds, its branches vast and abundant. At the center of its trunk was a narrow crack, bound together by countless interwoven vines. The surface felt soft to the touch, like living flesh. He Changkong stepped through the gap first. Su Zimo and the ancestral warden followed, the texture yielding like spun cotton beneath their fingers, with a strange, springy elasticity. But once they passed through, the ancestral warden froze, his eyes wide in astonishment. Before them lay an endless expanse of divine land. Mountains and rivers stretched beyond sight, dense with surging spirit energy. Celestial herbs and immortal trees crowned the peaks, while visions of heaven and earth appeared constantly in the skies. Mighty creatures could be seen in the distance, swallowing the essence of sun and moon. Above it all, the galaxy hung across the heavens, while blazing suns intertwined with drifting snow. What a sacred land, the ancestral warden breathed. Even he could not contain his awe. Even compared to the ancient demon realm, this place was its equal, perhaps greater. It wasn't that the ancient demon realm was lacking. It had flourished for countless ages, filled with divine beasts and immortal flora. But this land was different. It carried divinity itself. Divinity was a mysterious thing. Even a clump of soil imbued with divine essence could spark a war between empires. Yet here, the very air overflowed with divinity, not born naturally, but forcibly extracted and infused into this world by human hands. From the outside, no one would ever imagine that the violet mist holy lands concealed such a vast inner realm. They say the violet mist holy lands has long since fallen, the ancestral warden murmured. But seeing this, many so-called holy sects are far beneath it. Please come, He Changkong said with an easy smile. He seemed utterly at ease, long accustomed to this divine paradise. The violet mist Saint Sovereign's resurrection, Su Zimo said. I assume I'm not the only one invited to guard his Tao? He Changkong paused for a moment, then smiled. The young master sees clearly. Yes, 3 others have also been invited. Who? The ancestral warden asked curiously. The bright mirror Saint Sovereign, the demon refining Saint Sovereign, and the moonlight fairy, He Changkong answered. 3 Saint Sovereigns? The ancestral warden exclaimed, his breath catching in his throat. That's impossible. After all, Saint Sovereigns were beings rarely seen, their existence like divine dragons, known by name but almost never encountered. Each one was the ancestor of a holy lineage, forever meditating and striving toward higher realms. It seems the Samsara Saint Sovereign's arrival wasn't just for revenge, the ancestral warden murmured. He must have caught wind of this revival long before. Ancestral warden was no fool. After thinking it over for a moment, he immediately understood what was going on. Meng Luanhui's death, while significant, the man had been the holy son of the ancient Samsara god realm, wasn't enough to justify the Samsara Saint Sovereign's personal intervention. That saint was no ordinary being. Since the era of the progenitor boundless Saint Sovereign, he had been the strongest existence within the ancient Samsara god realm. How could someone of his stature descend in person, bringing along the sacred Samsara mountain, merely to avenge a single fallen holy son? Clearly, he must have caught wind of a far greater matter, the imminent resurrection of Violet Mist Saint Sovereign, and the fact that several Saint Sovereigns had been invited to serve as her protectors. That, in itself, spoke volumes. Just to invite Su Zimo alone, Violet Mist Holy Lands had offered the inheritance of the Wind God. So what benefits, then, had been promised to the other 3 Saint Sovereigns? To dare stand against the heavenly court was to take a gamble against heaven itself. The risks were immense, but the potential rewards were surely enough to tempt even a saint. Thinking this, ancestral warden's gaze sharpened slightly. Violet Mist Holy Lands was far more mysterious than he had imagined. He Chong Kong only smiled faintly, saying nothing. As the group continued walking, Ancestral Warden noticed that although Violet Mist Holy Lands spanned a vast and seemingly boundless territory, there were surprisingly few disciples. The roads were quiet, the halls deserted, many areas completely lifeless. The disciples and elders have all been evacuated, He Chong Kong said, seeming to read Ancestral Warden's thoughts. When war breaks out, they'd only be in the way. As they talked, the three of them finally arrived at the place where Ziyan was to be reborn. It was a vast crater filled with birdsong and the fragrance of flowers. From within that pit, waves of pure vitality emanated outward, thick with the sense that new life was about to be born. Ancestral Warden stared in surprise. He had earlier sensed the divine aura saturating this realm and had wondered where it originated. Now, seeing this pit, he realized the source of that divinity was right before him. What a supreme treasure ground shaped by heaven and earth itself, Su Zimo said with a smile. This was no man-made formation. It was a naturally bestowed land of life and power. With a treasure ground like this, Violet Mist Saint Sovereign's chance of resurrection increases greatly, Ancestral Warden said in admiration. You're mistaken, He Chong Kong replied with a chuckle. This place wasn't prepared for our ancestor. It was made for her guardians. The life energy here won't help the saint's rebirth. Rebuilding her body is a matter of laws and divine rules. But when battle comes, this vitality will help you all recover from injury. They descended into the crater, walking through the lush, fragrant air. The ground beneath their feet glowed a soft emerald green, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of life itself. In the very center of the pit stood an enormous altar. It was carved from flawless white jade, mist curling upward from its surface. At its peak rose a triangular spire, clutched between which was a shining orb. That orb seemed to swallow the heavens and earth, swirling with primordial chaos. Upon the altar sat Ziyan herself. She wore a flowing violet robe that shimmered like clouds at dawn, radiant enough to make it hard to look directly at her. Her long black hair cascaded like a waterfall down her back. Her nose was straight, her eyes brilliant with divine light. At this moment, she looked nothing like the Ziyan they had once known. Her aura was transcendent, like that of a celestial being descended into the mortal realm. Beside her stood three figures: Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign, the Demon Refining Saint Sovereign, and the Moonlight Fairy. It seems we have more company, one of them said with a grin. He was an elderly man, his waist adorned with a gourd, wearing a coarse gray-brown robe. His face was deeply wrinkled, and when he smiled, there was something slightly lecherous about him. This was the Demon Refining Saint Sovereign. There's demonic energy about you, said the middle-aged man beside him, suddenly opening his eyes. He wore a white robe that shimmered like burning embers, and around his neck hung an ancient mirror, simple, yet majestic. It was like a chest plate, yet somehow fused with his body itself. The man's aura was enigmatic and profound. He was Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign, whose mirror reflected the past and present, illuminating all realms, even the depths of the 9 hells. Among the Saint Sovereigns, he was one of the most renowned. Violet Mist Saint Sovereign certainly has influence, the Demon Refining Saint Sovereign chuckled, to even bring a member of the demon race to her side. As far as I know, said Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign, the demon race only has 2 Saint Sovereigns. Which one might you be? Hellfire Azura and Celestial Devourer. These 2 names were like mountains pressing down on all of demonkind. For countless millennia, no one had dared provoke the demons. The reason was simple: those 2 stood at the peak of the Saint Sovereign realm, true sage monarchs. It was said they had once waged war against the heavens themselves, ruling over an entire era of demonic dominion. Though that era had long since passed, buried beneath the dust of time, its echoes were proof enough of the demon's might. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign's gaze deepened. Through his heavenly mirror, he knew more than most. Ziyan rose gracefully from the altar, smiling. With fellow Taoist Su here, My confidence in this rebirth grows even stronger. Don't forget our agreement, Suzimo said. I won't, Ziyen replied with a nod. And how should I address you, friend? Asked Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign, stepping forward and fixing his gaze on Suzimo. Names are meaningless, Suzimo said with a calm shake of his head. I'm merely a traveler passing through. Seeing that Suzimo didn't wish to reveal more, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign didn't press the issue, but his eyes never once left him. Beside them stood the final protector, a woman of ethereal grace, untouched by worldly dust. This was the Moonlight Fairy. Her very presence was pure and cool, like moonlight on snow, her brows faintly furrowed, her gaze icy and distant. Enough, Ziyen said at last. Since everyone's here, let's discuss our plan. My reincarnated body must merge with the Grand Tao and comprehend the flow of time. That process will take at least half an hour. I don't expect you to defeat the Heavenly Court's envoys. Just delay them for that long. Half an hour? Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign frowned. That's a long time. What truly matters is the level of power the Heavenly Court sends. Only then can we gauge our chances. Though they were Saint Sovereigns, none among them were sage monarchs. If several sage monarchs descended, even lasting 10 minutes would be difficult, let alone 30. That, Ziyen said with a teasing smile, is something we should ask our demon ally. Her gaze turned toward Suzimo. After all, the Heavenly Court's campaign to annihilate the demon realm and hunt its survivors had begun to spread in whispers. Most of the world remained ignorant, but among the strong, the news had already circulated. The demon race, The demon refining Saint Sovereign said, glancing at Suzimo with a sly grin. No offense, friend, but I've heard the rumors. The demon realm has fallen. The Heavenly Court is hunting your kind, said the Moonlight Fairy softly, the first time she had spoken. I have no interest in the Heavenly Court, Suzimo replied evenly. Nor will I betray your whereabouts. But as for who they'll send, I truly don't know. How could you not know? Asked the Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign immediately. Because I left before the ancient demon realm was destroyed, Suzimo replied. But roughly estimating, for the Heavenly Court to annihilate the ancient demon realm, they would need at least 2 sage monarchs. After all, Hellfire Azura was guarding that realm, and the ancient demon realm itself possessed a unique, powerful environment. Without 2 sage monarchs, there was no way to defeat Hellfire Azura. At those words, everyone's pupils contracted sharply. That's quite an outrageous statement, the demon refining Saint Sovereign said, frowning slightly. What's wrong, fellow Taoist? Are you afraid? Ziyen asked calmly, smiling faintly. Not afraid. The demon refining Saint Sovereign shook his head. I'm simply curious. Why must Taoist Violet Mist choose to attempt her breakthrough now? Right at the height of this turmoil? The Heavenly Court just wiped out the ancient demon realm, and their main forces are still stationed in the God-fiend Abyss Heaven. Attempting a breakthrough at such a time seems unwise. If you waited until the storm calmed, wouldn't your chances of success be higher? That's right, said the Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign. Taoist Violet Mist has waited so long already. Why rush now? He too felt this was not the right time. In truth, the Heavenly Court had influence lingering in every corner of the 9 heavens. These remnants represented both their will and their intelligence network. Whenever something major occurred across the realms, the Heavenly Court would be the first to know. Although these forces were not powerful, their presence made many uneasy. That was why the others tried to dissuade Ziyen, believing that if she waited a little longer, her odds would be better. I understand that logic, Ziyen said with a helpless smile. But I have my reasons, and I have no choice. There's no room for negotiation. I must break through today. If any of you fear the consequences, you may withdraw now. I will not hold it against you. Forget it. The Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign sighed. Since we're already here, there's no turning back. Agreed, said the demon refining Saint Sovereign. But the reward Taoist Violet Mist promised us must not be lacking. Although they feared the Heavenly Court, this was still the God-fiend Abyss Heaven. not the heavenly court's own calamity, immortal heaven. With our unity, how could we fail? Ziyan smiled, then gave her instructions. City Lord He, please entertain our guests for a while. I have something to discuss privately with young Master Su. Ziyan led Su Zimo to a secluded spot near the edge of a deep pit. She smiled faintly. Young Master Su, as promised, I will now give you half of the Wind God's inheritance. I'll entrust the matter of guarding the path to you. Su Zimo nodded slightly. Ziyan closed her eyes, and the world fell silent. The next moment, a soft breeze swept through the air. It was so gentle, so subtle. Then suddenly, her eyes snapped open. Her pupils had turned cyan, triangular and vertical like a divine beast's. Her black hair shimmered, transforming into flowing strands of blue-green silk under the influence of a mysterious power. Her hair, like endless rivers, floated around her, ethereal and eternal. I will pass half of the Wind God's inheritance to you, Ziyan said solemnly. But understand this well. Inheritance is not a mere technique or power, it is a Tao. It is the Tao sought by the ancient gods, the law they seized from the heavens themselves. The cyan radiance around her grew brighter and brighter until it condensed into countless glowing runes. These runes pulsed with life, each one wrapped in a cluster of light. Soon, they gathered together, forming what looked like an immortal scripture. From that scripture flowed endless Tao rhythm, the resonance of the grand Tao echoing across the void. Under Ziyan's control, the scripture surrounded Su Zimo, and a mysterious, profound force enveloped him. His mind cleared completely. He felt the presence of the wind, gentle, warm, and boundless, wrapping around him. All things in existence had wind. The wind was everywhere. Even walking stirred faint breezes. Every exhale of breath, every sigh, carried the rhythm of wind. At that moment, Su Zimo felt as though he controlled the entire world. The wind he had never truly sensed before now flowed as freely as his own limbs, completely at his command. But the wondrous state lasted only a short while before it suddenly vanished. He awoke abruptly, opening his eyes to a world that felt subtly changed, though he could not say how. He knew this was because he had only received half the inheritance. He could sense the Tao but could not yet wield it. How does it feel, young Master Su? Ziyan asked with a smile. It's extraordinary, Su Zimo replied in admiration. Come, Ziyan said lightly. We shouldn't keep the others waiting. As they walked, Su Zimo suddenly asked, I heard the Wind God once tried to destroy the world. Ziyan stopped in her tracks. She shook her head slowly. That was never my ancestors' intention. But once certain things come to pass, even the gods themselves cannot stop them. So high heaven struck him down, Su Zimo said quietly. That was long ago, Ziyan replied with a small smile. If the young master is truly curious, you can investigate it yourself. She turned toward the altar. The two of them rejoined the others. Ziyan stepped onto the altar, her expression solemn. The once still altar erupted with powerful waves of primordial energy. My friends, I will leave you here, said He Changkong with a light chuckle. The heavenly court is approaching, and with my meager strength, I can't do much to help. He turned and left, and no one tried to stop him. Only Su Zimo's gaze deepened, his thoughts unreadable. In the endless void, Miss Jing sat upon a lotus blossom. The golden petals surrounded her, bathing her in divine light. Her face was serene, almost sacred, like a living bodhisattva. Countless other lotuses floated down around her, filling the sky as the great Tao itself coiled protectively about her form. After a long time, she exhaled softly and opened her eyes. This place, this domain, was a void outside reality, undetectable by even the strongest beings. She looked into the depths of the emptiness. She had awoken from meditation because someone had arrived. The Moonpluck fairy approached, her expression blank, her figure drifting through layer upon layer of space. Beneath her feet, the Tao unfurled endlessly. In her hand, she carried a person. If Su Zimo had been present, he would have recognized her immediately. The one being carried was none other than Wu Zhaodi. "I told you not to bring anyone here," Miss Jing said, frowning. "I've tracked down his whereabouts," the Moonpluck Fairy replied respectfully. At those words, Miss Jing's eyes sharpened, gleaming with dangerous light. "I knew it, he's not so easy to kill. Even the strongest infinite Tao strike wouldn't be enough to finish him. Where is he now?" "He went to the God-fiend Abyss Heaven," said the Moonpluck Fairy. "I should have known," Miss Jing murmured. "He's gone to seek the ancient demons." Miss Jing's gaze pierced through the endless void, as if she could see across to the God-fiend Abyss Heaven and find Su Zimo's figure there. "And what of this woman?" Miss Jing asked. "She's someone he met in the God-fiend Abyss Heaven," Moonpluck Fairy replied respectfully. "It said he even helped her become the realm lord of the celestial Yuan God realm." "Oh? Then she's someone close to him," Miss Jing said with mild amusement. She extended her right hand and gently placed it on Wu Zhaodi's forehead. Strands of immense power surged into Wu Zhaodi's consciousness. But before long, Miss Jing withdrew her hand, her once serene face turning slightly pale. Just now, she had peered into Wu Zhaodi's river of time. The river of time was not something one could gaze upon lightly. Su Zimo could do so because of the primordial chaos bead. He was uniquely blessed. Even for someone like Miss Jing, the strain was tremendous. "This person can be of use," Miss Jing said calmly. "Erase her river of memories and give her new ones. But I can't perform that myself. We'll have to seek out the Lord." The Lord she mentioned was shrouded in utter mystery. Even she had never seen their true face. At this moment, the violet mist Holy Lands was radiant with boundless light. Beams of multicolored radiance shot into the heavens, stirring the clouds into waves before cascading back down, painting the entire sky with shimmering hues. Upon the altar, 7 colored shields rose around Ziyan, enclosing her completely. No one could see what was happening inside. Not even the divine senses of a saint sovereign could penetrate it. "So this is reincarnation?" the ancestral warden asked curiously. It was his first time witnessing such a thing. "Ordinary people can't reincarnate," Su Zimo explained. "See that altar? That's the altar of time rebirth. It takes tens of millions of years to nurture it, and it can only be used once each cycle. When the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign faked her death back then, she placed her life soul within it." "That's right. I've heard that altar isn't from our God-fiend Abyss Heaven," said Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign with a laugh. "It came from the Calamity Immortal Heaven, created by the Heavenly Court." Su Zimo glanced at Ziyan, who was attempting her rebirth. It seemed her trip to the Paradise of Gods back then hadn't just been about stealing a divine herb. "Will the reincarnation succeed?" the ancestral warden asked again. "If she relied only on the altar of rebirth, the chances would be half and half," Su Zimo said. "But I believe she's made other preparations." The divine senses of the saint sovereigns extended for billions of miles. As the light of the violet mist Holy Lands illuminated the sky, the entire God-fiend Abyss Heaven saw it. No matter where one stood, the radiant glow could be felt. This was no ordinary light. It carried the Samsara primal Tao. It merged seamlessly with the void. Ordinary people might not sense it, but the strong could feel it clearly. Time passed. Instead of dimming, the radiance only grew stronger, spreading from the heavens as though it intended to envelop the entire domain. Su Zimo withdrew the ancestral warden into his god world. A grand emperor like him would be of little help in what was to come. "They're coming," someone whispered. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign drew out a bright mirror embedded in his chest. That mirror could see through past and present alike. A beam of ancient light shot out from it, shining onto the void before them. The void ignited, forming a great screen that displayed a distant scene tens of millions of miles away. Amid the rolling clouds, a colossal immortal warship surged forward like a sun. Its prow was shaped like a dragon's head, its body oval and wreathed in lightning. Wherever it passed, thunder roared and divine might filled the sky. On the enormous sail were 2 golden words: Heavenly Court, radiant and eternal. Before those words, even gods and immortals would retreat and all beings would bow. "What a grand entrance," said Moonlight Fairy, her eyes narrowing. "The heavenly court always loved their pomp." The demon-refining Saint Sovereign chuckled. "But to be fair, they've earned it." "Indeed," even Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign admitted with a sigh. "Throughout history, countless forces have risen strong, but everyone knows their limits. Only the heavenly court's strength is unfathomable. No one knows how deep their foundations run, how many powerhouses they truly have. If they're so strong, you still dare to oppose them?" Su Zimo asked with a faint smile. "Fellow Taoist, you misunderstand," Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign replied, shaking his head with a laugh. "The path of cultivation is one of defying all odds, struggling against heaven itself for joy. If we do not fear heaven, why should we fear the heavenly court? At worst, once this is over, we'll simply hide. The heavenly court may be mighty, but they're not yet invincible across the 9 heavens." Su Zimo nodded silently. At the Saint Sovereign level, fear was a rarity. Few things could truly shake such beings. Everyone sat cross-legged, regulating their energy, calmly awaiting the heavenly court's arrival. Thunder boomed across the sky. The immortal warship, traveling faster than light, closed the distance in seconds. From a far-off speck, it now loomed just above them, its presence oppressive. Even before it arrived, the world quaked under its divine pressure, as if the heavens themselves were enraged. The dragon-headed ship's eyes glowed, cutting through the radiant clouds. Then came a voice of heavenly might. "The heavenly court descends. Violet Mist Holy Lands, why have you not come forth to greet us?" The entire god-fiend abyss heaven trembled. For 1,000,000,000 years, the heavenly court had not appeared in such force. Countless saint sovereigns across the realms felt a chill in their hearts. "Violet Mist Holy Lands? What place is that?" Some began to murmur. After all, in recent ages, the Violet Mist Holy Lands had been so low profile that few even knew of its existence. They rarely even recruited disciples. An oddity, since new disciples were the lifeblood of any sect. "Do you still remember that peerless talent from long ago?" someone asked. He Chong Kong. The name sparked a flood of memories across countless hearts. Throughout history, there had been many geniuses, but few could compare to the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. He Chong Kong was one of the rarest of them all. "I thought the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign died ages ago," someone muttered. "Why would the heavenly court appear now? Could there be some hidden truth?" Leaving aside the countless gazes fixed upon the scene, before the gates of the Violet Mist Holy Lands, the dragon head spewed torrents of godly power, trying to obliterate everything before it. But at that very moment, the Holy Land erupted in radiant light, cloaking itself in a multicolored barrier that sealed it away from harm. The dragon's power grew more violent, yet the barrier held firm, woven from infinite threads of divine essence. The Violet Mist Holy Lands itself was a treasure ground. To drain all its energy in a short time was no simple feat. The dragon head's might had been pounding for a long while when, within the immortal warship, a presence grew visibly impatient. A deep, heavy snort echoed. Though it was only a snort, the sound boomed like thunder, shattering layers of void. Then from within the warship, a colossal hand emerged, vast enough to blot out the entire sky. It gathered the endless spirit energy into its palm, ripped through the void, and slammed down upon the protective barrier of the Violet Mist Holy Lands. With a resounding boom, the entire shield quaked violently. Cracking sounds echoed one after another as fissures spread across its surface. A final explosive bang followed. The barrier shattered completely. "A sage monarch," said Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign, his eyes narrowing with gravity. To break such a defense in a single strike, this was not something just anyone could do. Even Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign himself knew he could never achieve that with one blow. As the barrier broke, the massive warship remained hovering in the air, its dragon head glaring down at the figures below, particularly the one within the altar, Ziyen. From within the ship came a voice of immense authority. "Violet Mist Saint Sovereign, you once stole the heavenly court's sacred treasure, the altar of rebirth, and destroyed half of the paradise of gods. You should have perished for your crimes, yet you dare attempt to rebuild your strength in another life. Today, I will erase the violet mist holy lands and end your delusions once and for all. But Ziyan was in the crucial stage of her reincarnation. The altar was nurturing her 3 souls, so she could not respond. From the warship, a man slowly stepped forth, radiant gold. Behind him followed 2 Grand Emperor slaves. When he traveled, even Grand Emperors served as his attendants. His eyes swept across Suzimo and the others. Though he had heard of the so-called Infernal Lord, he did not recognize Suzimo. After all, they had never truly met. You are not of the Violet Mist Holy Lands, are you? Radiant Gold asked indifferently. Just nameless wanderers unworthy of a sage monarch's notice. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign said with a light smile. If you are not of the Violet Mist Holy Lands, then know this, the Heavenly Court's judgment is vast, but we are not without discernment. I do not slay needlessly. Leave now, and I shall act as though none of this ever happened. Radiant Gold declared. The sage monarch is magnanimous? Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign replied with a shake of his head. But since we have been entrusted with this duty, we cannot withdraw. Then I shall annihilate you all, Radiant Gold said coldly. He lifted his palm. Instantly the heavens and winds converged into his grasp. His strike carried the fury of the firmament itself as it descended once again. In single combat, none of us can match him, muttered the demon-refining Saint Sovereign. It's not about victory or defeat, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign said. We only need to delay him for half an hour. I'll go first. He unfurled the bright mirror in his hand as immense power surged from within. Infinite void condensation. A radiant beam shot out from the mirror, striking Radiant Gold. Wherever the light touched, the void solidified, completely frozen in place. This was not mere spatial imprisonment. It drew in all surrounding space, compressing and refining it together, forming a single impenetrable layer of reality. It was as if the combined might of 1,000 dimensions had been forged into one. Though Radiant Gold's body was bound, his descending palm still fell. The demon-refining Saint Sovereign raised his gourd and shouted, "Treasure gourd, absorb!" That colossal strike dissolved into formless energy, which was then swallowed entirely into the gourd. Ah, a sage monarch! The demon-refining Saint Sovereign chuckled darkly. It's been ages since my treasure gourd tasted such powerful energy. Radiant Gold remained unbothered, his gaze turning toward the mirror in Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign's hand. A fine treasure indeed, he said calmly. A primordial innate treasure, born of heaven and earth itself. He studied Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign a moment longer. No wonder you bear the title of Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign. You must have attained enlightenment from the sacred mirror itself. The sage monarch's insight is unmatched, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign said with a faint smile, though inwardly he felt a chill. The mirror truly was his companion artifact, but to be precise, he himself was not human. He had once been a divine mirror born from the fabric of creation. Over countless years, he transformed into human form and attained the Saint Sovereign realm. A being such as you, Radiant Gold said, if you joined the heavenly court, your future would be limitless. Pity you chose the wrong path. Sword energy flared around him, and behind him, the 2 imperial attendants lifted their blades. A long sword cleaved through the silence, descending into Radiant Gold's grasp. In that instant, the condensed void shattered completely. Around him surged an infinite sea of trillions of swords, an endless ocean of blades. One sword to sever the Tao, Radiant Gold said. He extended his right finger. At its tip, countless sword intents and the endless sword sea condensed into a single tiny blade. With a gentle flick, the small sword flashed. It pierced the heavens, descending faster than sight could follow. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign quickly raised his mirror as a shield. A sharp crack rang out, the sword strike struck the mirror, and it shattered instantly. Everyone around was stunned. Such destructive force, terrifying beyond belief. So this is a sage monarch. The demon refining Saint Sovereign murmured under his breath. You truly cannot comprehend the difference between us? Radiant Gold said coldly, standing high above the sky, looking down upon them. A mayfly shaking a great tree, utterly futile. Even Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign himself was shaken. He stared at the shattered remnants of his mirror, clarity flickering in his eyes. Then his pupils vanished, replaced by reflective surfaces, like twin mirrors. It was as though his eyes could now reflect all things beneath heaven. I possess a mirror that reflects the eternal firmament. Boundless saintly power surged from him like a vast ocean. His aura blazed with radiant mirror light. Behind him appeared his true destiny form, a grand and ancient mirror. Above it coiled two mighty beings, a dragon and a phoenix. The dragon and phoenix entwined, breathing in the very essence of the heavens and earth. The mirror expanded several-fold, shining directly upon Radiant Gold. Banish! Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign cried. The void around Radiant Gold began to devour itself, not to kill him, but to exile him into deeper dimensions. Once banished, returning would take an eternity. For now, the force of exile clashed against Radiant Gold's own might, one seeking to banish, the other freezing the void in place. The sage monarch truly is formidable, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign said quietly, his eyes fixed on Radiant Gold. His banishment power was something few Saint Sovereigns could resist, yet here it met its match. Forced exile, he shouted again, his power intensifying. Impressive, Radiant Gold said evenly. But unfortunate. You met me. Believe me, before you can exile me, I'll have already killed you. The spirit energy in Radiant Gold's hand gathered once more. Behind him, the faint image of an ancient immortal appeared, majestic and divine, bathed in endless celestial light. That brilliance illuminated the heavens, its radiance even surpassing the sacred glow of the violet mist holy lands. Sword bearing heaven's will. Another sword descended. It was not merely a sword strike. It seemed to merge with the heavenly Tao itself. The blade carried the power of the firmament, embodying the law of heaven. As the radiant light fell, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign's expression changed drastically. His heart pounded violently. This was the unmistakable feeling of death approaching. His mirror was warning him. Without hesitation, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign withdrew his mirror and leapt into the deep layers of the void, trying to evade the attack. Retreat! Shouted the demon refining Saint Sovereign in alarm, his face pale as he dodged to the side. When the sword finally struck, silence swept across the world. Even the earth itself was torn apart. The entire landscape seemed plowed by sword intent. Explosions rumbled without end, and countless craters of varying sizes scarred the ground. Yet the altar, shimmering with seven-colored divine light, remained untouched, as if that devastating attack could not harm it at all. Even Radiant Gold glanced at it with deep focus. As expected of an innate treasure, he said coldly. This time, it will return to the heavenly court. How? Curious. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign murmured, his trembling hand gripping the mirror tightly. He could sense the overwhelming pressure more keenly than anyone else. So this is the power of a sage monarch. Among all the saints beneath heaven, the king reigns supreme. Truly, a realm that inspires envy. Can you still hold on? Asked the demon refining Saint Sovereign. If not, we'll face him together. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign nodded without argument. Against a sage monarch, it was nearly impossible not only to win but even to delay him for any length of time. Fellow Taoist Moonlight, Taoist Su. The demon refining Saint Sovereign called back to Su Zimo and the Moonlight Fairy. This sage monarch is ours to handle. If others descend from the immortal warship, we'll count on you. The arrival of the warship surely meant there was more than one sage monarch aboard. That none had appeared yet only meant they didn't even consider these opponents worth noticing. Understood. The Moonlight Fairy replied with a nod. That one sword strike could pierce the heavens, tearing up the earth, shattering the void, bearing the weight of the heavenly Tao itself. Dust and debris billowed everywhere, but Radiant Gold paid them no mind. His gaze remained fixed on the altar. He snorted coldly. A dead one trying to rise again? Today, I'll scatter your soul once more. He raised his right hand, and his long sword rippled through the void. Don't you dare! Shouted the demon refining Saint Sovereign. He and Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign flanked Radiant Gold from both sides, surrounding him. Numbers won't make a difference, Radiant Gold said coolly. You won't know till you try. The demon refining Saint Sovereign replied with a grin. He turned to Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign. Force the banishment. I'll buy you time. Earlier, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign had failed to complete the exile because Radiant Gold's power was too overwhelming, never giving him the slightest opening. If they could just hold him long enough, the result could be vastly different. All right, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign said with a nod. Behind him, the vast mirror condensed once again. The power of banishment shone brightly, focusing upon Radiant Gold's back. This time, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign dared not underestimate anything. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. He opened it slightly, and a single droplet of bright red blood floated out. Though it was only one drop, it radiated with the aura of divine laws, as if it could reshape the heavens themselves. Saint Sovereign's true blood, Radiant Gold murmured, his eyes narrowing. Such blood was no ordinary essence. Each drop took millennia to refine. It was said that when a sage monarch advanced toward the infinite Tao realm, he had to refine every drop of blood within his body into true blood. Only then might he grasp even a hint of the primordial edicts beyond primal Taos. The difficulty was unimaginable. For a Saint Sovereign, a single drop of true blood was as precious as life itself. And now, Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign infused that drop into his mirror. How generous! Suzimo remarked with a faint smile. I truly wonder what the violet mist Saint Sovereign promised to make Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign fight so desperately. Once the true blood merged into the mirror, its power surged by at least 30%. The void condensed even more tightly, so much that even Radiant Gold's surrounding sword aura began to freeze in place. Since you're so eager to die, Radiant Gold said coldly, I'll grant your wish, Sword of Destruction. All around him, the aura of annihilation spread. Waves of ashen-brown spirit energy filled the heavens, energy that carried death and ruin, enough to make the sky itself tremble. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign's face turned grim. You keep going, I'll hold him off, the demon refining Saint Sovereign said. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign nodded, and the power of exile intensified once more. Meanwhile, the entire firmament had been swallowed by destructive sword intent. Dark clouds gathered, heavy and oppressive, brewing an atmosphere of despair. Within the storm, those sword energies moved like colossal dragons, writhing through the clouds. Radiant Gold brought his arms together before his chest, solemn and majestic. Above his head, the countless strands of destructive sword intent converged, forming a single, titanic sword that pierced the heavens, stirring the blackened clouds. Slay! Radiant Gold uttered. The giant sword of destruction fell from the sky, tearing through the void. Even before it reached them, its aura alone made everyone's bodies ache, as if they were being sliced apart by 1,000 invisible blades. Stop him! Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign shouted. The banishment was reaching its critical point. Abandoning it now would waste everything they had built. Looks like it's time for these old bones to move again, said the demon refining Saint Sovereign with a strained laugh. Though he smiled, the weight in his eyes was unmistakable. Treasure gourd, it's up to you. He removed the green gourd from his waist, patted it gently, and tossed it into the sky. At first, the gourd swayed lightly. Then an immense suction force erupted from it, sweeping across the heavens, attempting to devour the descending sword of destruction. The demon refining gourd ripens once every 10,000 years. 2 gourds on one vine, yin and yang innate in one. Radiant Gold immediately recognized it, speaking coldly. If you had both, the yin and yang gourds together, perhaps you'd stand a chance. But with only the yang gourd, it's far from enough. Whether it's enough or not, we'll see soon. The demon-refining Saint Sovereign snapped, displeased at being looked down upon. He snorted. Your heavenly court has endless riches. We wanderers can't compare. Then why not join us? Radiant Gold replied. We never mistreat our own. That won't be necessary, the demon-refining Saint Sovereign said, shaking his head. I've lived freely all my life. I'll die the same way. High above, the descending sword of destruction collided with the heavenly court's demon-refining gourd. The sword of destruction sought to annihilate everything in its path. Wherever it passed, not even a blade of grass remained. From the mouth of the demon-refining gourd, waves of blazing solar fire burst forth. This sunfire not only possessed the power to devour, but also the ability to melt anything without limit, melting and consuming as one. It was indeed a rare treasure. Yet, the single yang gourd was clearly no match for the sword of destruction. It was suppressed in midair, sinking slowly as it was pushed downward bit by bit. In the heavens above, the demon-refining Saint Sovereign stood tall. Behind him, a phantom of another gourd manifested, the projection of his true life essence. Back then, when the yin-yang vine bore the twin yin and yang gourds, countless cultivators fought over them. Though I failed to seize the yin gourd, I witnessed its birth and divine phenomenon. I inscribed that vision upon my own life. I may lack the true yin gourd, but my true fate itself has evolved into one. With a cold snort, the saint's true life yin gourd spewed out endless frost. This frost was not ordinary ice. It was a grayish chill formed from the purest yin energy of heaven and earth. Seeing this, Su Zimo nodded in quiet admiration. This demon-refining Saint Sovereign is clever. Since his single yang gourd couldn't unleash its full potential, he used his true life essence as a substitute for the yin gourd. Beside him, Moonlight Fairy finally spoke. Indeed, but the true fate is the foundation of a cultivator's path. What he gains now, he'll lose later. His cultivation will never surpass the yin-yang gourd. Hearing her words, Su Zimo didn't deny it, but he didn't fully agree either. It depended on how one interpreted limitation. The true fate was indeed vital for a cultivator's future. Su Zimo's own true fate was an entire world, a complete, living world. The potential of such a true fate was unfathomable. In terms of true life essence alone, calling himself the greatest of all ages would not be an exaggeration. When one reached the Grand Emperor realm, and later the Saint Sovereign realm, the applications of true life essence would only grow more mysterious. The demon-refining Saint Sovereign, however, had chosen to sacrifice his true life for a mere artifact, binding it to the concept of the yin gourd. Such a true fate was inherently limited. Because his life essence mirrored the yin-yang gourd, his strength could never exceed that archetype. To go further, he would have to evolve it into a primordial chaos gourd, a terrifyingly powerful existence, but the price for that would be beyond measure. High above, when the phantom yin gourd appeared, the tide of battle began to shift. The power of yin merged with the yang gourd. In an instant, ice and fire united, the dual forces of heaven and earth fusing and counteracting. The devouring force suddenly surged. Half of the sword of destruction was already being consumed by the gourd's swirling energy. Even Radiant Gold's expression changed slightly. It's working! The bright mirror Saint Sovereign exclaimed with joy. The power of banishment he'd been building was reaching completion. Radiant Gold's form was already blurring, fading from this realm. But then, from the front of the celestial battleship, the dragon-shaped prow's eyes flared open, and from its maw erupted a massive shockwave. "Not good!" shouted the demon-refining Saint Sovereign. He was already stretched thin, suppressing the sword of destruction. He had no strength left to block this attack. At the critical moment, Moonlight Fairy stepped forward. Dressed in pure white, she seemed a celestial being descended to earth, ethereal, flawless, otherworldly. When she moved, heaven and earth trembled, the sun and moon dimmed. A fairy of peerless beauty. With a graceful flick of her sleeve, what appeared to be a soft motion easily neutralized the devastating shockwave. A creation god, one step away from Sage Monarch. Su Zimo murmured. Among them all, she's the strongest. Enough. End this. Came a furious voice from within the battleship. A massive orb of primal Daos was hurled out. Within it, the powers of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth rotated endlessly, along with wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. The sphere struck down, slamming onto Moonlight Fairy with oppressive force. The next moment, the void around them rippled violently. More than 1,000 Grand Emperors appeared, each wearing the robes of the heavenly court. Normally, to a Saint Sovereign, even 1,000,000 Grand Emperors were nothing. But now, each Grand Emperor sat cross-legged, a deadly weapon floating above their heads, and strange seals forming in their hands as they chanted incantations. It's a formation, said the Mirror Saint grimly. And not just any formation. The demon-refining Saint Sovereign added, face dark. The primal Dao sphere above Moonlight Fairy exploded, ripping apart the void at its center. The half-banished radiant gold was blasted back into the world. The saints' faces grew heavy. The three of them, back to back, stared at the encircling heavenly court Grand Emperors. In mere moments, the formation had trapped them completely. Escape was no longer possible. Damn it, we've been had, growled the demon-refining Saint Sovereign. We were so focused on banishing that Sage Monarch, we didn't even notice these Grand Emperors setting up the formation in secret. It was a well-laid trap. From the very moment the heavenly court descended, their plan had been to capture them all in one sweep. The chanting continued. The air thickened, the void sealing tighter and tighter. Then, from the celestial battleship, an old man walked out. His hair and beard were white, his bearing dignified and serene, his aura that of another Sage Monarch. Ancient Void, Radiant Gold called. What do you suggest we do with them? Ancient Void's eyes gleamed coldly. You have two choices, he said evenly. Submit peacefully and face the heavenly court's judgment. We'll spare your lives. Or resist and be annihilated. The demon-refining Saint Sovereign burst into laughter. I've cultivated for over 30 million years and never once bowed my head. He glanced down toward Su Zimo. Brother Su, how about we work together, strike from within and without, and break this formation? Su Zimo smiled faintly. I think I'll pass. If you leave now, you'll gain nothing, said the bright Mirror Saint Sovereign sharply. I can live with that, Su Zimo replied, shaking his head. Young Master Su, don't forget who you are, the bright Mirror Saint Sovereign shouted, panic in his tone. Su Zimo was of the ancient demon race, and right now the heavenly court was actively hunting them. The others knew this. Radiant Gold and the rest, however, did not realize that the very demon they sought stood before them. Without another word, Su Zimo tore open the void and vanished. Seeing him go, Radiant Gold snorted. At least he knows his place. You'd better chase him, the demon-refining Saint Sovereign said with a sneer. Isn't your heavenly court hunting the ancient demon race? How ironic, the one you want most was right here, and you didn't even see it. When the demon-refining Saint Sovereign spoke, both Radiant Gold and Ancient Void narrowed their eyes. You think I'll fall for such petty provocation? Radiant Gold said coldly. Believe it or not, replied the saint. But the 9 heavens are vast beyond measure. Miss this chance, and the next time you want to capture a demon, it'll be harder than reaching heaven, unless they walk right into your net. Radiant Gold's gaze deepened. He looked toward Ancient Void. Watch those 3, he ordered. I'll chase down that brat myself. With that, he tore open the void before him and vanished, following the lingering trace of Su Zimo's energy. The ever-shifting void roiled around him as he moved. The holy might radiating from his body was immense. By his estimation, his speed far exceeded Su Zimo's. He followed the faint trail through the folds of space, until finally, in the distance ahead, he caught sight of Su Zimo's figure. The figure flickered briefly before disappearing again. But it was enough. He had found him. Radiant Gold ripped through the space between them and, before he realized it, found himself just outside the borders of the Violet Mist Holy Lands. Su Zimo stood calmly before him, smiling faintly, not like someone fleeing for his life, but as if he had been waiting. "Demonic scum," Radiant Gold barked, raising his hand. "Submit now, and I might grant you a swift death." His palm came down like a mountain, crushing the air with divine force. "What's the rush?" Su Zimo said, still smiling. "I'm not running anywhere. I'm more worried about you trying to run." The moment the palm descended, a second palm emerged from the void, meeting it head-on. With a thunderous crack, the collision shook the skies. Radiant Gold was forced back several steps, his expression hardening as he looked at Su Zimo. "A sage monarch," he said, eyes narrowing. "You're one of the remnants from the ancient demon realm." As he spoke, the figure of Celestial Devourer appeared beside Su Zimo, confirming his suspicion. "You guessed right," Celestial Devourer said with a grin. "But there's no prize for it." Radiant Gold's face grew grim. "Today, the Heavenly Court descends upon this world," he said coldly. "None of you will escape alive. You might want to take a look at your own situation first," Su Zimo said lightly, snapping his fingers. Instantly, four immense auras erupted around Radiant Gold, each radiating the might of a saint sovereign. They were Celestial Devourer, Redblade Bull Demon, Sevenface, and Paimon. The four didn't simply surround Radiant Gold. They stood in precise positions, forming the nodes of an ancient peerless formation. This was no ordinary trap. It was one of the great formations designed long ago during the war between the ancient demon realm and the Heavenly Court. The Heavenly Court had studied ways to annihilate ancient demons. The ancient demon realm, naturally, also focused on destroying the Heavenly Court. Now, four Saint Sovereigns stood as the pillars of this immortal Slayer formation, and their combined demonic might pressed so heavily that Radiant Gold could barely lift his head. A chill spread through his body. He finally understood he had walked right into a massive trap. In his eagerness to chase Su Zimo, he hadn't considered the possibility of ambush. He had assumed that, even if Su Zimo had allies, they would be nothing more than remnants of a defeated army. Now he saw how wrong he was. The Heavenly Court had gravely underestimated Su Zimo, who had already gathered 4 of the infernal archons under his command. "What are you planning?" Radiant Gold demanded. "What do you think?" Su Zimo replied. "My lord," Redblade Bull Demon snorted. "Why waste words? Let him taste the edge of my axe." "He's probably praying for death already," Su Zimo said with a faint smile. "Don't worry, I won't let him die. If Radiant Gold were killed outright, his life-death soul would restore him. He would merely suffer grave injury, then resurrect, and could expose everything about Su Zimo to the Heavenly Court." Radiant Gold snorted coldly and swung his sword, unleashing a storm of sword intent that slashed wildly at the formation around him. "Seal his meridian gates," Su Zimo ordered calmly. "Capture him." At once, the 4 infernal archons activated the formation. Dark infernal energy surged skyward, splitting the clouds apart. From the heavens, thick black storm clouds churned as chains of demonic iron began to descend. The Heavenly Court's power came from immortal energy. It was said that the court's founder had created a divine technique capable of refining immortal energy itself, which naturally restrained infernal energy. But the ancient demons had not been idle. They had adapted their cultivation arts, reshaping their infernal energy into a force that could in turn restrain also immortal energy. Immortal energy subdued infernal energy. Infernal energy subdued immortal energy. In the end, the victor depended only on who was stronger. As the purple-veined, rune-covered demonic chains fell from the heavens, Radiant Gold's expression twisted in alarm. He struck again and again, his sword energy violently shredding the air as he roared, "Kill me if you dare, ancient demons! Your race will be wiped from existence soon enough." "Maybe so," Su Zimo replied calmly. "But when I destroy the Heavenly Court, I'll make sure you see it happen." "Infernal Lord!" Radiant Gold shouted, his voice cracking with fury. "If you have any courage, face me one-on-one. Don't hide behind your lackeys. Su Zimo shook his head. If it were a duel between progenitors or immortal lords, perhaps. But you're not qualified. He ignored the provocation entirely. He carried the inheritance of the previous infernal lord within him. By invoking that power, he could temporarily wield strength equal to his predecessor, but every use diminished it. Until he reached his own peak, he had to conserve it carefully. Wasting it on radiant gold would be foolish. The chains continued to descend, glowing with demonic light. Radiant gold struggled desperately, but they wrapped tighter and tighter, binding his limbs, his neck, even his mind. Soon he could no longer move or speak. His immortal energy turned stagnant, his meridians sealed as though frozen. When the last chain locked in place, radiant gold stood immobilized. Su Zimo walked toward him slowly. I know, he said, that asking you about the heavenly court now would be pointless. You wouldn't talk, so I'll give you some time to think. If after that you still refuse, I'll destroy your meridians. Believe me, your heavenly court has no use for cripples. Rage burned in Radiant Gold's eyes, but he couldn't utter a word. Su Zimo didn't care. He simply opened a portal to the God world, his personal world, and threw Radiant Gold inside. Within that world, Su Zimo was absolute. With that matter settled, he turned to Paimon. Did you find the location I told you to track? As expected of you, my lord, Paimon replied, nodding. About 800 miles from here, there's an isolated particle world. Then let's have a look, Su Zimo said, smiling faintly. It's about time we completed our inheritance. Su Zimo did not return to the Violet Mist Holy Lands. Instead, he followed the direction indicated by Paimon, heading steadily northward. After some time on the road, he finally stopped before an open field. The area lay in the middle of a vast plain, surrounded by endless grasslands and completely devoid of people. Su Zimo swept his gaze around. The infinite Samsara demon eye opened, and he scanned the void again and again, searching carefully. At last, he seemed to have found something. The shadow of his great blade, Shadow Tyrant, came unsheathed behind him and slashed fiercely toward a point in the air. Instead of the explosion one might expect, the void split open, revealing a glowing portal. Found it, Su Zimo murmured, and without hesitation, he darted into the gate. As soon as he entered, ripples spread outward through the air like waves on water. The scene before his eyes changed. Above him, the heavens glowed with radiant colors, dense clouds of divine light rolling like the dawn of creation itself, pregnant with powerful life energy. Then, a slow clap, clap, clap echoed through the tranquil world, unnaturally sharp against the silence. Within the blazing sea of radiance, a gaze pierced through countless layers of void and locked directly onto Su Zimo. Should I call you the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign? Su Zimo asked with a faint smile, looking toward the figure hidden within the light. The figure said nothing for a long time, then finally asked, When did you find out? From the very first moment we met, Su Zimo replied with an easy smile. I was certain my disguise was flawless, the figure in the glow said. Even the other Saint Sovereigns were fooled. How did you see through it? There's only one reason, Su Zimo said. Someone like you would never entrust your fate to anyone else. If it were me, I wouldn't either. As he spoke, the radiant light began to fade away, and the figure's true face was revealed. It was He Changkong, the Lord of Skywind City. He was the true reincarnation of the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. As for Ziyen and the Saint Sovereigns who guarded her, they were merely decoys, bait to distract the heavenly court and other powers. Meanwhile, the real Violet Mist Saint Sovereign hid within this particle world, quietly completing her reincarnation and rebuilding her cultivation, preparing to break through to the sage monarch realm. In truth, when Su Zimo had first met Ziyen in Skywind City, he hadn't noticed any flaw in her disguise. It was perfect, nearly impossible to see through. But there had been two things that raised his suspicion. First, the Heavenly Court had just finished its campaign against the ancient demon realm, its main forces still stationed in the God-fiend Abyss Heaven. Why would Violet Mist Saint Sovereign choose that exact time to reincarnate? Second, a cunning old fox like the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign, someone who had lived for countless eras, would never leave her fate in the hands of others. If her guardian Saint Sovereigns failed to protect her from the heavenly court, her entire plan would have collapsed. That was why, when He Changkong had left the Violet Mist Holy Lands, Su Zimo secretly ordered Paimon to follow him. Sure enough, while the heavenly court's forces were battling the guardian saints, He Changkong had entered this hidden world to begin his breakthrough. Su Zimo looked around. Reincarnating and rebuilding one's cultivation was no simple task. Since He Changkong had abandoned the traditional rebirth altar, he must have found something else to replace it. Then Su Zimo's gaze landed on a pure white flower behind He Changkong. The flower looked as though it had been sculpted from ice. Its stem glimmered like frozen crystal, and its 5 petals each radiated a different kind of primal Tao. One burned with fiery heat, another gleamed with cutting sharpness. One carried the vitality of rebirth, another the omen of death itself. The flower was so beautiful that it seemed unreal, something that shouldn't exist in this world at all. "This is the soul flower of ghost faces," Su Zimo said in surprise, then chuckled softly. Quite the clever scheme. The soul flower of ghost faces was extremely difficult to cultivate. It could only grow using the life-death souls of Saint Sovereigns as its foundation. To fully mature, it had to consume large quantities of the true blood of both Grand Emperors and Saint Sovereigns. It seemed the Violet Mist Holy Lands had poured nearly all its resources into nurturing this single flower, waiting for this exact day. When the soul flower of ghost faces bloomed, it would last for only 3 hours. After that, the heavens themselves would strike it down with divine tribulation and erase it from existence. Its miraculous power was so defiant that the natural order would not permit it to survive. It was common knowledge that once a cultivator reached the Saint Sovereign realm, they would form their life-death soul, a core of existence that ensured immortality. As long as that soul remained intact, a Saint Sovereign could not truly die. At that stage, they faced 2 choices. The first was to fuse the life-death soul back into their body. The advantage was clear. This granted immense power, allowing them to overwhelm peers of the same level who hadn't fused theirs. But the weakness was equally severe. If they were ever slain, their opponent could easily locate and destroy the fused soul, wiping them out completely. The second option was to hide the life-death soul in a secret place. That path granted less power, but made them far harder to kill. Even if their body perished, they could resurrect from the hidden soul's location. The soul flower of ghost faces before them, however, granted something beyond either choice, a second life-death soul. Such a heaven-defying effect was forbidden by the natural primal Daos themselves. That was why Violet Mist Saint Sovereign had to attempt her breakthrough today, even though the heavenly court's main force was still away in the ancient demon realm. If she missed this window, the flower would be destroyed, and the opportunity lost forever. "Your ambition's a bit too grand," Su Zimo said with a faint smile. He Changkong met his gaze, eyes gleaming coldly. "Fellow Taoist Su," he said slowly, "does our agreement still stand?" "What agreement?" Su Zimo asked. "You guard my ascension," He Changkong said, "and I'll give you the remaining half of the Wind God's inheritance." "It still stands," Su Zimo replied, "but I'll be adding one more condition." At those words, He Changkong's expression darkened, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes. "I won't give you the soul flower of ghost faces," he said coldly. "Don't be so hasty," Su Zimo said with an easy smile. "You're attempting reincarnation and rebuilding, aren't you? I can help you." "Fellow Taoist Su," He Changkong said, narrowing his eyes, "don't push me too far." He wanted not only to complete his rebirth, but also to use the soul flower of ghost faces to gain an extra life-death soul for himself. "If you force me," he warned, "we'll both lose everything." "No," Su Zimo said with a light laugh. "There's nothing I've ever wanted that I couldn't take." "Kill!" He Changkong roared, unwilling to delay any longer. His body burst with boundless radiant light, and he dove like a falling star from the heavens, a storm of divine power crashing down toward Su Zimo. The entire small world shook, thunder crackled across the sky, and the very ground began to fracture. "It's not enough," Su Zimo said, shaking his head. "With your current cultivation, you're still not my match." His blade, Shadow Tyrant, rose skyward, and with one sweep, he slashed toward the heavens, splitting the world with a single strike. That single slash tore through the heavens, as though it had cleaved a chasm across the sky itself. He Changkong's charging figure was blown backward before even touching the blade's intent, sent flying by the residual force alone. He staggered back more than 10 steps before managing to steady himself. "You're clearly a grand emperor," He Changkong said, eyes narrowing gravely. "So why do you possess the power of primal Tao?" "I already told you," Su Zimo said calmly. "When I want something, no one can stop me." He Changkong snorted coldly, clearly displeased by Su Zimo's arrogance. "And when I refuse to give something up," he said, "no one can take it from me." He stood suspended in the air, surrounded by a faint purple glow, exuding a sense of dominance, as if he alone stood apart from the world, looking down on all things. The violet mist around him gathered closer and closer, and his aura swelled rapidly. In the blink of an eye, a sacred might spread from him, filling the heavens. The sky howled, torn by raging winds and surging power. "And now," He Changkong said with a cold sneer. "Look beside you," Su Zimo replied with a faint smile. He Changkong turned his head, and his face changed instantly. Standing next to the soul flower of ghost faces was another man. It was Paimon. What truly terrified He Changkong was that he hadn't even noticed when Paimon had appeared there. He stared at the man for a long time before finally speaking. "A sage monarch?" Paimon only smiled silently. His right hand, shrouded in infernal energy, slowly reached toward the soul flower of ghost faces. "Who are you, really?" He Changkong asked quickly, uncertainty creeping into his tone. "I am nothing more than a minor infernal archon under my lord's command," Paimon said, shaking his head as if his name wasn't worth mentioning. "Don't joke with me," He Changkong snapped. "He's just a grand emperor. How could he possibly have that kind of follower?" "There are matters in this world beyond your understanding," Paimon said softly. "Enough of your theatrics," He Changkong growled. "No matter who you are, you will not take that flower." "You don't get to decide that," Paimon replied evenly. His right hand closed around the soul flower of ghost faces. The flower had already developed a spirit of its own, resisting fiercely against his grasp. Its petals trembled, releasing a powerful aura as it struggled to break free. "Courting death," He Changkong roared. The violet aura around him surged for millions of miles, his cultivation soaring until it reached the peak of his past saintly power. "I've heard," Su Zimo said with a light smile, "that your ancestor once sought to destroy the world, and in doing so created a technique. Tell me, how much of it have you mastered?" He Changkong was a descendant of the wind god Tianwu. Long ago, Tianwu had nearly destroyed the world and was ultimately slain. The details of that event had been lost to the passing of ages. No one living knew the truth. "You'll find out soon enough," He Changkong said coolly, unprovoked by the remark. He closed his eyes briefly in concentration. A faint current of wind flickered in his gaze when he opened them again. "Wind is everywhere," he intoned solemnly. "It may pass gently, or it may sweep across heaven and earth." His voice carried the weight of invocation. The winds around him swirled and thickened, transforming from a gentle breeze into a raging tempest. Apocalypse storm. The very air changed. The wind turned pitch black, as though it carried the deathly stillness before the end of the world. The wind brushed across Su Zimo's face like knives, burning and biting at his skin. All the winds of heaven and earth gathered around He Changkong, forming a massive tornado. The black storm tore open the sky itself, leaving the land below riddled with gaping wounds. "Kill!" He Changkong shouted, sending the apocalyptic storm surging toward Paimon. "A fine technique indeed," Paimon said with rare approval. You've grasped the primal Tao of wind to its utmost limit. If you had reached the realm of Sage Monarch, perhaps by your ancestors' grace, you might have even touched upon the trace of a primordial edict. But in the end, he continued, your realm is far too low. Without crossing into Sage Monarch, how can you fight me? Even in his prime, He Changkong had been no more than a saint sovereign, just one step short of Sage Monarch. He had spent countless years preparing for that breakthrough, seeking to obtain 2 life-death soul. Paimon raised his right hand. The infernal energy of despair condensed into a great scythe. Gripping the weapon, he looked like the embodiment of death itself. As the storm roared toward him, he swung the scythe once. At first glance, it seemed an ordinary motion, but when it struck, heaven and earth split apart. The small world around them shattered. For an instant, He Changkong felt the illusion that the blade had passed through his own neck, harvesting his very soul. A chilling cold swept through his body in that instant, even though he knew it was only an illusion. With that single swing, the world itself seemed severed. The apocalypse storm was obliterated, scattered into nothingness beneath the strike. That, He Changkong thought in shock, was true apocalypse, true annihilation. He swallowed hard, unable to speak for a long time. He could only watch as Paimon plucked the soulflower of ghost faces from the ground and handed it to Su Zimo. Finally, He Changkong gave a bitter smile. I never should have provoked you, he said quietly. I've only invited a wolf into my home. He had used the wind god's inheritance as bait, intending to draw the ancient demons into his schemes, only to learn that when power reaches a certain height, all schemes are nothing but jokes. When will you hand me the rest of the inheritance? Su Zimo asked. You still have the face to ask? He Changkong shot back. Do you really think I'd give it to you? Why not? Su Zimo said lightly. What if I could help you ascend to Sage Monarch? You'd return the soulflower of ghost faces to me? He Changkong asked, surprised. To help you ascend doesn't necessarily require that flower, Su Zimo said with a smile. Oh? Then I'd like to hear this, He Changkong replied skeptically. He thought Su Zimo was boasting. Samsara and restoration were immensely complex. Without the aid of divine treasures like the soulflower of ghost faces, it was nearly impossible. Even he himself no longer held much hope. You've been reborn, Su Zimo said. What you lack is merely the baptism of primal Tao and a touch of the power of creation. The power of creation would rebuild your body. The power of primal Tao would push you across the threshold to Sage Monarch. The two are inseparable. You say it so easily, He Changkong said with a wry smile. The power of creation gives birth to life itself. That's the domain of the heavens. All we can do is search for divine objects that contain a trace of it. The power of creation, Su Zimo said softly, raising his right hand, isn't so difficult. At first, He Changkong didn't take him seriously. But when he saw the radiance swirling in Su Zimo's palm, his eyes widened in disbelief. His breath quickened. The power of creation? He stammered. Then he looked Su Zimo up and down in shock. Don't tell me. You're the embodiment of heaven itself? Thieving heaven, Su Zimo said with a shake of his head. That depends on how you see it. The so-called thieving heaven has many divisions. It's just that the world doesn't understand, and lumps them all together under one name. The power of creation in his hand was genuine, but only Su Zimo knew that it did not belong to the 9 heavens. It came from his own world, the God world. If He Changkong used this power to rebuild himself and reincarnate, then he would no longer belong to the 9 heavens. He would become a being of Su Zimo's God world. In other words, his fate would rest entirely in the hands of Su Zimo, the creator of that world. This was Su Zimo's experiment, or rather, the beginning of his invasion of the 9 heavens, starting with He Changkong. The sight of the real yet illusory power of creation in Su Zimo's hand left He Changkong almost disbelieving his eyes. Where did you get that? He asked. Why ask so much? Su Zimo said. Do you want it or not? I do. If you can truly help me reach the realm of Sage Monarch, I'll give you the rest of the inheritance. He Changkong said with a nod. At this point, he no longer cared if there was a scheme behind it. He had waited countless years for this day, prepared his whole life for this chance to ascend. His obsession had long since become a demon within his heart. Sit cross-legged and prepare to break through, Su Zimo said. I'll time it right and grant you the power of creation. He Changkong nodded. At this stage, all he could do was trust Su Zimo. He sat cross-legged in the air. The violet mist of his aura spread for hundreds of millions of miles, covering the entire small world in its glow. Before entering this place, Su Zimo had already scanned it with his divine sense. It was an ownerless small world, fragmented and broken, and aside from themselves, there were no living creatures within it. It was indeed an ideal place for a breakthrough. The world itself concealed the abnormality of the violet aura. From outside, no one would see what was happening here. As He Changkong calmed his body and mind, his form gradually turned blurry, his figure fading into the aura. This step was the retracing of his past, rebuilding his old Saint Sovereign realm. Su Zimo watched carefully, then raised his hand. The power of creation in his palm slowly floated upward toward the heavens, then drifted gently toward He Changkong. The rest is up to you, he murmured. Rebirth and reconstruction were troublesome matters, dangerous ones. A single misstep could destroy not just the attempt, but the person entirely. The violet glow around He Changkong flickered with both deathly stillness and the faint stirring of new life. It would take time, so Su Zimo did not disturb him. He took out the soul flower of ghost faces. The flower had to be used quickly, or the heavenly tribulation would destroy it. Guard me, Su Zimo said to Paimon. He then sat cross-legged himself. After adjusting his state of mind, he swallowed the soul flower of ghost faces in one gulp. Strangely, the flower melted the instant it entered his body, turning into a warm current that flowed through his meridians, circulating endlessly through his channels, great and small. But instead of feeling comfort, Su Zimo felt a burning heat spreading inside him. Worse still, an invisible force was tearing at his divine soul. The soul was the root of all things, and that pain came not just from the body, it cut deep into the spirit. Blood began to trace the corner of his mouth. His entire body turned crimson, flushed with power and strain. He activated the hell-suppressing demon physique. Infernal energy surged to the heavens, so intense it even overshadowed the violet aura around him. Inside his body, the tree of life continuously repaired the damage. Time passed, he didn't know how long. His body was drenched in sweat, his mind blurred. Gradually, consciousness returned. He quickly turned his senses inward, and saw it. Above his true fate stood two miniature figures identical to himself, as though he had been reduced in size tenfold. One radiated vigorous life. The other was filled with deathly stillness. Two opposing auras, life and death. So this is the life-death soul, Su Zimo murmured. He hadn't even reached the Saint Sovereign realm, yet he already possessed a life-death soul. Once he ascended to the Saint Sovereign realm, he could condense another. Endless power flowed from those two souls, resonating with every part of his being. That force spread from his core through his meridians, feeding back into his body. Even his 10th meridian gate, long sealed, began to tremble, as if something within were pounding at the gate, the energy surging more and more fiercely. Su Zimo drew in his aura and slowly opened his eyes. The world around him seemed to shift between light and shadow, life and death interwoven, dissolving into the horizon. He stood, power radiating in waves from his body. Though still technically a Grand Emperor, aside from the unopened Meridian Gate, he was now little different from a Saint Sovereign. With both Primal Tao and the Life-Death Souls, one could almost call him a pseudo-saint. But Su Zimo didn't linger in self-admiration. He turned his gaze toward He Changkong. The violet glow still shrouded everything, but now he could hear faint, rhythmic thuds, like the beating of a heart. He's done it, Su Zimo whispered. Within that light, an immense aura was awakening. The baptism of Primal Tao, Su Zimo said to himself. That part's not difficult. He already commanded the power of Primal Tao himself. He Chongkong's Primal Tao was of wind, so Su Zimo gathered wind-attribute Primal Taos together. They thickened in the air, gathering like heavy clouds until the heavens themselves seemed to darken. When they reached their limit, Su Zimo shouted, "Descend!" Countless streaks of shining wind Primal Tao poured down like waterfalls from the heavens. The violet mist Saint Sovereign was completely engulfed, his body immersed in that ocean of divine Primal Tao. His aura grew stronger and stronger. Winds roared across the world, his momentum soaring ever higher until it reached a breaking point. After a few moments, there came a soft pop, as if something invisible had shattered. And then the aura of a sage monarch spread through the entire small world. The violet light receded. He Chongkong, now the violet mist sage monarch, opened his eyes. In their depths, radiance and shadow flickered together. "Well," Su Zimo said with a smile. "Congratulations, sage monarch." The violet mist sage monarch looked at Su Zimo without answering, his expression complicated, as though weighing something. "What is it?" Su Zimo asked lightly. "Thinking about whether to make a move against me? Should I thank you," the sage monarch said slowly, "or hate you?" He had indeed broken through to sage monarch. Su Zimo hadn't deceived him, but in doing so, he had also lost the chance to obtain the soul flower of ghost faces, and with it, the chance to form another life-death soul. "People should learn to be content," Su Zimo said with a smile. "That advice applies to you as well," the violet mist sage monarch replied. "What about the rest of the inheritance?" Su Zimo asked. "I can give it to you," the sage monarch said. "But you have to promise me one thing." "What thing?" "Although I'm now a sage monarch, my foundation is still unstable. If I encounter a strong opponent, my life may be in danger," the violet mist sage monarch said. "So, I want you to act as my protector." "That's impossible," Su Zimo said, shaking his head. "I still have other places to go. I can't stay here." "That's fine. I can go with you," the violet mist sage monarch said with a faint smile. Su Zimo gave him a long, thoughtful look. "So that's your real intention. You're heading to the Inferno Crucible Heaven, aren't you?" the sage monarch said, pointing toward the sky. "Coincidentally, I've grown tired of this place. I'd like to visit the other heavens as well." The 9 heavens were shaped like a tower. From the lowest level of the mortal ascension heaven upward came the ghost god heaven, the god-fiend abyss heaven, and then the Inferno Crucible Heaven. As the name suggested, the Inferno Crucible Heaven was dominated by fire. It was the world ruled by the Hua heavenly clan. "What is your goal?" Su Zimo asked. "No goal," the violet mist sage monarch replied lightly. "I simply want to travel with you. But I guessed right, didn't I? You're not from the god-fiend abyss heaven." He had secretly suspected it before, that Su Zimo was no native of this place, but was traveling upward through the 9 heavens, searching for the inheritances of the 9 ancient gods. As for the purpose behind it, the sage monarch didn't know. He was simply curious. And besides, he had grown weary of the god-fiend abyss heaven after so long. "Do you know how to reach the Inferno Crucible Heaven?" he asked again, as if afraid Su Zimo might refuse. Though the 9 heavens were connected, not every place was directly linked. The sky above and the void of the Inferno Crucible Heaven were, in fact, part of one great continuum, impossible to break through by force. Only at certain points, where the void was thin, could one pass between domains. "Then tell me," Su Zimo said with mild interest, "how does one reach the Inferno Crucible Heaven?" "The Lotus Pathway, ruled by the Hua heavenly clan," the violet mist sage monarch replied with a smile. 16 million years ago, the Hua heavenly clan took control of the only passage from the god-fiend abyss heaven to the Inferno Crucible Heaven. Since then, anyone who wishes to ascend must gain their approval. "You seem to know quite a lot," Su Zimo said. "It's not hard to learn," he added inwardly. He could have easily asked the ancestral warden, surely that man would know. "So, will you take me with you?" the sage monarch pressed. "Fine," Su Zimo said. But I won't be responsible for your safety. When the time comes, you'll follow my lead. Agreed, the sage monarch said immediately. Now, I can give you the remaining half of the inheritance. Suzimo didn't rush to accept it. Instead, he asked, "Have you ever met your ancestor? You're curious about the origin of my inheritance." The violet mist sage monarch said with a small laugh. "It doesn't really matter. Our family's inheritance doesn't need to be passed down manually. Every descendant is born with it." Born with it? Suzimo was surprised. "That's right. From the moment I was born, the inheritance was already in my memory," the sage monarch said. "A bloodline inheritance," Suzimo murmured, impressed. "Your ancestor must have paid a great price to achieve that." The violet mist sage monarch remained silent. His ancestor had been an ancient god, but he himself felt little connection. The ancient god era was too distant, predating even the demon descent era. Some said that the age of the ancient gods had been the very first era of the nine heavens. To the sage monarch, his ancestor was little more than legend, a name lost to time. Among the nine ancient gods, some say your ancestor was the only one personally slain by heaven itself, Suzimo said. But I don't believe that. Heaven doesn't strike without cause. Even if your ancestor tried to destroy the world, he wouldn't have had the power to threaten heaven. These things are too old. I don't know much myself, the violet mist sage monarch replied, shaking his head. The ancient truth buried by time, Suzimo murmured. Forget it. Let me give you the rest of the inheritance, the sage monarch said. Suzimo sat cross-legged, adjusting his state to perfection. The violet mist sage monarch raised his right hand, and once again runes began to form in the air, swirling and assembling into a luminous chapter of divine script. Every rune pulsed with the essence of wind, fluttering as though alive. When the page of symbols entered Suzimo's mind, it fused seamlessly with the portion he had already obtained. In that instant, the once incomplete inheritance became whole. A breeze stirred his robes as though recognizing its new master. This inheritance contained two things: the wind of inheritance and the technique, Apocalypse Storm. The wind of inheritance was no ordinary wind. It was said to be the drowning wind, a divine wind that pulled all living things into oblivion, layer upon layer, like sinking into the ocean's depths. And as for Apocalypse Storm, it was the very technique Tianwu, the wind god, had once used to try to destroy the world. How does it feel? The violet mist sage monarch asked. Every ancient god deserves respect, Suzimo said quietly. They walked at the forefront of history. By now, he possessed the inheritances of three ancient gods: the fire god Zhurong, the wood god Jumong, and the wind god Tianwu. It's time to leave, Suzimo said softly. Paimon was returned to the god world, and the two of them stepped out of the small world. According to Suzimo's plan, their next destination was the Lotus Pathway. Led by the violet mist sage monarch, they decided not to use the teleportation formation in Skywind City. It would be too dangerous now. With Radiant Gold missing, the Heavenly Court would soon launch a massive search across the God-fiend Abyss Heaven. Even for an empire as vast as the Heavenly Court, the loss of a sage monarch was no small matter. After some discussion, they decided to use the teleportation formation in the nearby Moonlight City instead. I wonder how those Saint Sovereigns are faring, the violet mist sage monarch said. Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign and Demon Refining Saint Sovereign had fought to protect him. If they were killed by the Heavenly Court, he would feel no small amount of guilt. Don't worry, Suzimo said. If there were two sage monarchs holding them down, they wouldn't escape. But with Radiant Gold gone, one sage monarch alone won't be enough to capture all three Saint Sovereigns. As they spoke, both suddenly sensed something. They turned toward the void behind them, just in time to see it tear open. A figure covered in blood stumbled out. It's the Moonlight Fairy, the violet mist sage monarch said at once, recognizing her. Well, isn't that a coincidence? He added with a faint smile. We were just talking about them. It looks like she's the only one. The other two aren't here, Suzimo said. She's badly injured. The Moonlight Fairy staggered toward them, clearly on the verge of losing consciousness. "Help me?" she whispered weakly, looking at Suzumo and the Violet Mist Sage Monarch before collapsing into unconsciousness. The two exchanged a glance. Suzumo knelt to examine her wounds. She was indeed gravely hurt, but her divine soul remained intact. With the power of his Tree of Life, combined with her own formidable ability to heal, she should recover soon enough. "Looks like we'll be staying in Moonlight City for a few days," the Violet Mist Sage Monarch said. "Let's ask what happened first," Suzumo replied. The power of the Tree of Life surged from his palm, flowing gently into the Moonlight Fairy's body. Her pale complexion began to regain color at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even her breathing gradually steadied. As more life force entered her, the Moonlight Fairy slowly opened her eyes. "You too?" she said softly, looking at them with a complex expression. The Violet Mist Sage Monarch had asked her and the others to protect his path, only to use them as bait. And when they were trapped in the formation, Suzumo had left on his own. They should have been enemies, but now the two of them had saved her life. She didn't know what to say. "What exactly happened?" the Violet Mist Sage Monarch asked. "What about the Heavenly Court?" The Moonlight Fairy stood up and let out a cold snort, unwilling to speak. She turned to leave, but though awake, her body was still too weak. After only a few steps, she collapsed to the ground again. "Why be so stubborn?" the Violet Mist Sage Monarch said, shaking his head. "We're not your enemies." "Then what about the Moon God's stone you promised me?" the Moonlight Fairy demanded, fixing her eyes on him. If it hadn't been for the Moon God's stone, she would never have agreed to guard his path, let alone stand against the Heavenly Court for him. "Don't worry, I prepared it long ago," the Violet Mist Sage Monarch said with a smile. He waved his right hand and retrieved from his storage ring a glowing stone that shimmered with silver moonlight. Though he had deceived her and the others, he had at least kept his word about what he'd promised them. After all, he couldn't afford to make too many enemies. He was already irreconcilably opposed to the Heavenly Court. Seeing the Moon God's stone, the Moonlight Fairy's expression finally softened. She took it and said, "We're even now. Since we've gone this far, we might as well finish being good people. Let's take you to Moonlight City," the Violet Mist Sage Monarch offered. "In your current condition, even an ordinary person could defeat you. Moonlight Fairy, Moonlight City, there's a connection there, isn't there?" Suzumo asked. The Moonlight Fairy glanced at him and replied, "This city was founded by me. With your level of cultivation, why not build a kingdom instead?" the Violet Mist Sage Monarch asked. "I built Moonlight City only to protect my home village. Nothing more. Building a nation is too exhausting," she said, shaking her head. Before becoming a saint, she had been just a girl from a small village. After her ascension, she used her saintly power to establish Moonlight City, creating a haven under her protection. The Violet Mist Sage Monarch nodded slightly, moving to help her up, but she refused his hand. "Let him help," she said coldly, looking toward Suzumo. She rested her hand on his shoulder as she stood. Suzumo didn't mind. "Be careful of those two," the Moonlight Fairy warned. "You tricked them once. They'll surely hold a grudge." She was referring, of course, to the Demon Refining Saint Sovereign and the Bright Mirror Saint Sovereign. "How was it tricking you?" Suzumo said calmly. "Everyone was guarding their own path. I never said I'd join forces with you. It had only been the others' assumption that they were cooperating against the Heavenly Court." "What happened afterward?" he asked. "I'd like to know that myself," the Moonlight Fairy said, her eyes fixed on him. "The Sage Monarch chased after you and never came back. Don't tell me that has nothing to do with you." Suzumo didn't answer. "The three of us worked together to break the formation," the Moonlight Fairy continued. "The Sage Monarch seemed worried about his companion's disappearance, so he didn't pursue us." "Then how did you end up so badly hurt?" the Violet Mist Sage Monarch asked. "The Hua Heavenly Clan interfered. I didn't see it coming," she said coldly. The Hua Heavenly Clan? Aren't they stationed at the Lotus Pathway? The sage monarch asked, exchanging a look with Su Zimo. As far as I know, they don't involve themselves in the affairs of the god-fiend Abyss Heaven. Did you offend them somehow? The Hua Heavenly Clan today isn't what it used to be, the Moonlight Fairy said. They've fallen, reduced to the Heavenly Court's lapdogs. What do you mean by that? The Violet Mist Sage Monarch frowned. The Hua Heavenly Clan oversaw the only passage connecting the god-fiend Abyss Heaven to the Inferno Crucible Heaven. Everyone knew they were envoys sent from the Inferno Crucible Heaven, tasked with guarding the passage. They rarely interfered in worldly affairs, and thus it became an unspoken rule throughout the god-fiend Abyss Heaven. No one provoked the Hua Heavenly Clan, because behind them stood the terrifying power of the Inferno Crucible Heaven. But from what the Moonlight Fairy said, it seemed they were now working hand in hand with the Heavenly Court. That was troubling news for Su Zimo and the Sage Monarch. You probably haven't heard, the Moonlight Fairy went on. The previous patriarch of the Hua Heavenly Clan died mysteriously not long ago. A new patriarch has since taken his place. But rumor has it that the new patriarch is nothing more than a puppet raised by the Heavenly Court, a loyal dog. In other words, the entire Hua Heavenly Clan now follows the Heavenly Court's command. They're not afraid of punishment from the Inferno Crucible Heaven? The Violet Mist Sage Monarch asked. That would require the Inferno Crucible Heaven to even know. The Moonlight Fairy sneered. With the passage under their control, entering the Inferno Crucible Heaven isn't easy anymore, let alone sending word through. That's true, the Sage Monarch admitted with a nod. He fell silent, deep in thought. Things had already reached a point of no return. Begging the Heavenly Court for mercy was out of the question. That meant one thing. The Hua Heavenly Clan had just joined his list of enemies. The Hua Heavenly Clan has always been one of the Heavenly Court's hidden cards. They wouldn't have acted unless they were desperate. The Moonlight Fairy continued. She glanced at Su Zimo. It's because of the Sage Monarch's disappearance. They were forced to move. But one thing's certain. The Heavenly Court will soon turn the god-fiend Abyss Heaven upside down. No matter what, I must reach the Lotus Pathway, Su Zimo said firmly. Even if it means annihilating the Hua Heavenly Clan. I'm going with you, the Moonlight Fairy said suddenly. You? Su Zimo looked at her in surprise. I haven't avenged their sneak attack yet, she said coldly. Women really do hold grudges. The Violet Mist Sage Monarch muttered under his breath. Moonlight City should have a teleportation formation directly connected to the Lotus Pathway. Right? Su Zimo asked. You know what the Lotus Pathway really is? Moonlight Fairy asked with a strange look. It's just a blue lotus, nothing more. The Violet Mist Saint Sovereign replied. It is indeed a blue lotus, Moonlight Fairy nodded. But it mutated. Inside the lotus, a world of its own was born. The Tianhua clan lives within that lotus. According to rumors, within that lotus realm, they are the absolute rulers. Once we enter, things will not be so simple. You lack confidence in your own strength, said the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. It's not the Tianhua clan I'm worried about. Moonlight Fairy shook her head. It's the possibility that the Heavenly Court might have set an ambush there. We'll deal with it when we get there. Things have already gone beyond the point of reconciliation, Su Zimo said. If the Tianhua clan knew their place, there would be no problem. But if they insisted on standing in his way, he would crush their entire clan without hesitation. Far across the plains stood a quiet city. Moonlight City wasn't a large place, and its cultivators weren't particularly strong. It rested against the mountains, its people living simple and peaceful lives, rising at dawn, resting at dusk. Because the city was under the protection of a saint sovereign, few dared to cause trouble there. Still, Moonlight Fairy rarely showed herself, and among the city's inhabitants, only a handful had ever actually seen her. When the three arrived outside the city, Moonlight Fairy's face suddenly darkened. The city had been sealed. A bright white talisman seal was pasted across the heavy city gates. Inside, panic had clearly spread among the people. The three exchanged glances. Moonlight Fairy said coldly. I'm still injured. I can't fight for now. This time, I owe you a favor. Without a word, the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign stepped forward and kicked open the gates. With a thunderous boom, the city gates split apart, shaking violently. Beyond the gates stretched the city's main street, but it was eerily empty. Who dares to seal my Moonlight City? Show yourself. Moonlight Fairy's voice rang out. As her words fell, several servants appeared from afar, carrying a sedan chair. On that chair sat a man in a black robe, who seemed to have just woken from a nap. He stretched lazily and smiled. Moonlight Fairy, I thought you wouldn't be back for at least a month, he said. This is quite the surprise. The Realm Lord of the Nether God Realm, Fu Dongyue, Moonlight Fairy said with a frown. I didn't expect the fairy to still remember my name. What an honor, Fu Dongyue laughed. What is the meaning of this? Moonlight Fairy asked coldly. You can't blame me for this, fairy, Fu Dongyue said, still smiling. The Heavenly Court has issued a decree. Since you've opposed them, I have no choice but to comply. Moonlight Fairy's heart tightened. The Heavenly Court was fast. She and the others had only just escaped, yet the court had already investigated them thoroughly and sent orders to move against them. I don't recall the Nether God Realm ever being the Heavenly Court's lapdogs, she replied. Now, fairy, that's an unpleasant way to put it. The Heavenly Court is the foremost power in the world. We follow their decrees. We dare not disobey, Fu Dongyue said. You've been coveting Moonlight City for a long time, haven't you? Moonlight Fairy said coldly. When she had first established Moonlight City, she had used supreme divine arts to refine a celestial land and relocate it beneath the city. The area had become a treasure ground that absorbed the essence of heaven and earth. The Nether God Realm's territory bordered Moonlight City, and they had always lusted after it. But their patriarch, the Nether God, had only just reached the Saint Sovereign Realm and was no match for her. After suffering several defeats, he had lain low. Now, seeing her gravely injured and with the Heavenly Court's orders in hand, they pounced like rabid dogs. I was too merciful, Moonlight Fairy said coldly. I should have annihilated your Nether God Realm when I had the chance. But perhaps due to her anger, the backlash of her injuries surged, and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Fu Dongyue's heart settled. The Heavenly Court hadn't lied. Moonlight Fairy's wounds were indeed severe. If the fairy wants to destroy us, it's not too late to try, Fu Dongyue laughed. We've come right to your doorstep. Moonlight Fairy's eyes flashed with killing intent. Seize them. Fu Dongyue waved his hand impatiently. From within the city, dozens of armored soldiers appeared. The Nether Army, Moonlight Fairy murmured. These soldiers aren't particularly strong individually, but they've mastered a battle formation. Their armor is forged from high-grade materials. They might pose a threat to ordinary cultivators, but to us, they're still ants, the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign said calmly. He extended his right hand, energy gathering in his palm. The leading soldier sensed danger and shouted, "Form the battle formation!" Dozens of soldiers spread out, their hands moving rapidly as they wove complex seals. Countless sigils converged, and a powerful aura roared through the air. Heaven-suppressing formation, the leader bellowed. Heaven-suppressing? From mere ants, the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign sneered. The force in his palm crashed down like a mountain. The soldiers' eyes went wide with terror. They couldn't even dodge. The two forces collided. In an explosion that shook the streets, every soldier was instantly reduced to ashes. Even Fu Dongyue almost leaped from his chair. His gaze deepened, thoughts churning behind his calm expression. "Who are you?" Fu Dongyue demanded. "You're not worthy of knowing my name," the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign replied coldly. "3 elders, bring me his head," Fu Dongyue shouted toward the empty air beside him. From the still void came the sound of tearing space, as skeletal hands ripped open the air. 3 figures stepped out, their killing intent flooding the street. "The 3 Shadow Elders," Moonlight Fairy said grimly. "Triplet assassins, famous for their joint attack techniques. She had battled the Nether God realm long enough to know their inner workings well. Fu Dongyue, tell your patriarch, the Nether God Saint Sovereign, to come out himself. The rest of you are unworthy opponents, Moonlight Fairy said sharply. She wasn't wrong. The three elders were strong, but the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign was a sage monarch. With a flick of his hand, he could erase them. Whether we're worthy or not, you'll only know after we fight, Fu Dongyue said. The three elders advanced step by step, their pace quickening until they blurred into three streaks of shadow. The three shadows circled the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign at incredible speed. To onlookers, it was a storm of dust and spinning air, blurred shapes flickering through the void so fast that it was impossible to tell where the three actually were. Suddenly, a violet umbrella exploded open in front of the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. Its edges were sharper than blades, aiming straight for his throat. Too slow, said the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign with a faint shake of his head. He flicked his finger lightly, and the umbrella was blasted away. Sensing his overwhelming strength, the three shadow elders moved even faster, until, finally, they vanished completely. This was no mere speed, it was true disappearance. Interesting, the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign chuckled. Your mastery of shadow energy is quite pure. On the ground around him, three faint shadows appeared without warning. They crept closer, inch by inch, and then burst upward to strike. Solidify the void, said the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign calmly. Invisible power rippled through the air. The figures of the three elders froze in place, suspended mid-strike, unable to move. Their faces twisted with horror as they struggled to break free, but the pressure crushing them only intensified. How should I deal with you three? The Violet Mist Saint Sovereign asked with a faint smile. Let them go. Fu Dongyue's voice rose in panic. The Nether God realm will withdraw from Moonlight City. I swear it. It's too late for that, said the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. He waved his hand. Three streaks of divine radiance swept through the air, instantly engulfing and erasing the three shadow elders. You? Fu Dongyue's expression twisted with rage and fear as he stared at the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. But a heartbeat later, his face drained of all color. The Violet Mist Saint Sovereign was walking toward him, step by step, his entire body glowing with blinding divine light. The pressure pouring from him was like a tidal wave, unstoppable, suffocating. Fu Dongyue's knees trembled. With a flick of his finger, a ray of light shot from the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign's hand, flying straight for Fu Dongyue. No, I don't want to die, Fu Dongyue screamed. He tried to flee, but how could he outrun divine light? At the final moment, a pair of massive hands appeared in front of him, blocking the blow. I heard of disturbances in the Violet Mist Holy Lands, said an old, resonant voice. Taoist Violet Mist, must you go so far? The void rippled, and from it stepped a man in black robes, wreathed in ghostly mist, the Nether God himself. Patriarch, save me, Fu Dongyue cried out desperately. The Nether God frowned slightly, turning to the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. Taoist Violet Mist, you have quite the leisure for troublemaking. I hear the heavenly court is scouring the realms for you, and yet you still dare to show yourself. And what of it? The Violet Mist Saint Sovereign sneered. The 9 heavens do not all bow to their will. He and Su Zimo had gone to the Inferno Crucible Heaven partly to avoid the heavenly court's hunt. In the god-themed Abyss Heaven, the court had already wiped out the demon clans and acted without restraint. But the Inferno Crucible Heaven was ruled by the Flamebearer. Even the heavenly court had to tread carefully there. Give me some face, the Nether God said. I'll have the Nether God realm withdraw from Moonlight City. From now on, we'll leave each other in peace. What do you say? I follow one rule, the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign replied coldly. Once someone becomes my enemy, I destroy them completely. There's no such thing as turning hostility into friendship. Think carefully, the Nether God said, his voice hardening. You've only just recovered. Your cultivation must still be unstable. Don't bring disaster upon yourself. A first stage Saint Sovereign like you dares threaten me? The violet mist Saint Sovereign snorted. His voice cracked through the heavens like thunder. Then his radiance flared. He struck with a single palm. The nether god roared, his ghostly aura erupting as he met the blow head-on. The two forces collided, shaking the sky. The nether god's body was hurled backward. But the violet mist Saint Sovereign gave him no chance to recover. In a flash of light, he was upon him again. Radiance blazed upward, every movement of his hand carrying the weight of divine might. Nether sea, tide of death! The nether god bellowed, eyes burning with fury. Behind him, his true life manifestation appeared, a vast, rolling ocean. The sea was black as ink, formed entirely from concentrated ghostly energy that had condensed from vapor into liquid. The massive nether sea surged forward, engulfing all of Moonlight City beneath its tide. Then I'll drown this city and make everyone die with my sect, the nether god roared. He didn't fear death, for he possessed the life-death soul, a spirit core that guaranteed his resurrection. The violet mist Saint Sovereign couldn't kill him permanently. But if all of the nether god realm's forces perished today, his sect would be reduced to ashes. Moonlight Fairy, he shouted. You really want to die together with me? Die together? You overestimate yourself, the violet mist Saint Sovereign said coldly. The light around him grew so intense that it enclosed the entire Black Sea. Radiance for eternity. In that instant he became the light. The nether sea was purified, its ghostly energy dissolving, transforming into ordinary water. Damn it! The nether god's face twisted in shock. The radiance was the natural nemesis of his ghostly power. He turned to flee, but a blade of light sliced through the silent sky, cutting across the void. Its killing aura devoured everything in its path, swallowing the nether god whole. No! He screamed. His body shredded into mist and blood by endless blade energy before exploding into a cloud of gore. Don't let him escape, Moonlight Fairy shouted. Even in death, the nether god could resurrect through his life-death soul. If he revived, Moonlight City would be in grave danger. That was why, all these years, Moonlight Fairy had never destroyed the nether god realm completely. She feared that cornered, they would drag her city down with them. Don't worry, Suzimo said calmly. Above his head, the traceless compass and the heaven derivation astrolabe began to spin. All of the nether gods' exploded blood mist was pulled toward them. Empowered by the star disk, the compass whirled faster and faster. Even if he hides his life-death soul at the edge of the world, Suzimo said, I'll find it. The compass could trace anything as long as a causal link existed. There was nowhere to hide. At last, the pointer fixed toward the north. That's the direction of the nether god realm, said Moonlight Fairy. Then we move. The three exchanged a glance, then stepped into the air and sped toward the nether god realm. The nether god realm was located atop the Myriad Poisons Mountain, a paradise for venomous creatures. It was said that only disciples of the sect could survive there. Anyone else who entered would be devoured within minutes. Where is the Poison Sovereign? Moonlight Fairy called out sharply as they reached the mountain. The Poison Sovereign. So he really exists, said the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. I've heard of such a Saint Sovereign before, but he's rarely shown himself. This Myriad Poisons Mountain is his domain, Moonlight Fairy explained. When the Nether God realm settled here, the Nether God paid a tremendous price to gain his protection. That's why the sect's disciples can live here unharmed. Otherwise, the poisonous beasts would devour them all. A deep, booming laugh echoed through the mist that covered the mountain. So, Moonlight Fairy, what brings you here today? The fog churned, and a massive centipede emerged from within. It had more than a dozen legs, its body thousands of meters long, sprawling across the entire mountain. The poison swirling around it was so strong that even the void itself sizzled and warped. No living creature could approach without being dissolved. We're here to destroy the Nether God realm, Moonlight Fairy said. We hope you'll stay out of it, Poison Sovereign. I'm afraid that's not possible, said the Poison Sovereign, chuckling. The Nether God and I struck a bargain. I promised to protect the Nether God realm as long as they remain within my mountain. Once they leave this place, they're on their own. But here, they are under my protection. In that case, Suzimo said flatly, we'll just crush this mountain along with you. A petty bug dares to bargain? You've got quite the tongue on you, said the Poison Sovereign, his bulbous eyes narrowing. And who might you be? You're not qualified to know my name, Suzimo replied. I'll ask you once, fight or get out of the way. The Poison Sovereign hesitated. At his level, rash pride had long since given way to survival instinct. You're nothing but a freshly ascended Saint Sovereign, Suzimo said coldly. You think you can posture because the Nether God, a newly risen Saint Sovereign, tolerated you for your poison? Don't fool yourself, you're not beyond being slain. The Poison Sovereign laughed a few times, his tone suddenly more humble.
You jest anerdone.
The path of cultivation is long, and I'm but a small creature chasing enlightenment. Since you intend to deal with the Nether God realm, I'll not interfere, only please spare the creatures of this mountain. They are my disciples and descendants. With that, his enormous body faded into the mist. The toxic fog parted instantly, opening a broad path straight up to the Nether God realm's gates. The poisonous beasts lurking nearby slithered and crawled away, hiding in the shadows. He actually backed down, Moonlight Fairy said in surprise. She'd fought the Nether God for years, but always kept her distance from the Poison Sovereign. It wasn't that his strength was overwhelming, it was his venom. A single drop could turn a saint to bones. He's just a frog in a well, Suzimo said, shaking his head. He's grown comfortable ruling this poisonous mountain. If you try reasoning with him, he'll only press his luck. But if you show thunderous force, he won't dare to move. Well said. The Violet Mist Saint Sovereign agreed with a nod. The three followed the cleared path up the mountain toward the Nether God realm. A heavy gloom hung over the sect like a dark cloud. The disciples were terrified, whispering among themselves. Their patriarch, sect master, and every powerful elder had gone out, and none had returned. The remaining disciples had no leader to command them. The three arrived before the Nether God realm's gate. Though the sect had stood for thousands of years, its architecture remained grand and imposing, more like an imperial palace than a temple. The walls were built from netherstone, stones that naturally formed formations, dense with ghostly energy so thick it almost condensed into liquid, drifting through the air. Who are you people? A group of disciples demanded as they rushed to block the entrance. Senior brother, they're here, one of them cried, trembling. Only the leading youth remained calm. His gaze was steady as he said, Our master is away. The Nether God realm is not receiving guests. Please, leave. We're not guests, Suzimo replied casually. We're here to erase your sect. So drop the polite nonsense. The young man's expression hardened. He waved his hand sharply. Activate the Guardian formation. The disciples retreated inside. Suzimo and his companions didn't stop them. They simply watched in silence. Moments later, the protective formation ignited. Above the sect, a raging storm of ghostly energy swirled, coalescing into a massive divine beast. Qiongqi, Moonlight Fairy murmured. Do not panic, shouted the senior brother, his voice ringing across the mountain. Merge your spirit power with the formation. Live and die with the sect. The disciples rallied, channeling their energy into the formation. The spectral beast grew stronger, its aura swelling as it roared at Suzimo. There's still time to retreat, the young man warned, his eyes gleaming with defiance. Spare yourselves needless death. Pathetic, Suzimo said, raising his hand. He tossed Shadow Tyrant, his blade, into the sky. It streaked upward, carrying a killing aura so sharp it seemed to cut through reality itself. The knife light fell like a bolt from the heavens, slicing through the Qiongqi before it could even react. The beast exploded in a storm of light and vanished. How can this be? The young man gasped. He had believed the formation, empowered by the disciples' combined strength, could withstand anything. Yet it had fallen in a single stroke, fragile as paper. As the formation shattered, the disciples caught within had no time to flee. They were obliterated along with it, reduced to mist and blood. "From this day forward," Suzimo said from high above, his voice ringing like thunder, "the Nether God realm shall exist no more. Your patriarch and your realm lord are dead. Run if you can." His gaze swept across the sect as he spoke, his tone calm and final. Panic erupted. The patriarch slain? Impossible. He's a saint sovereign, immortal. Then why hasn't he appeared? Run. Run for your lives. The disciples scattered in chaos. "Master Su," Moonlight Fairy said quickly, "you must uproot them completely. If any survive, they'll cause trouble for Moonlight City." She wasn't afraid of weaklings, but too many fleas could still make a lion itch. "Don't worry," Suzimo said with a faint smile. "Do you really think they'll make it off this mountain alive?" "What do you mean?" Moonlight Fairy asked, confused. Before she could finish, screams echoed from within the sect. The poisonous beasts of the mountain were surging into the compound, tearing through the fleeing disciples, devouring them alive. "The Nether God realm is finished," Suzimo said. "The Nether God is dead, or soon will be. Do you think the Poison Sovereign would pass up such a feast?" Moonlight Fairy suddenly understood. "Come," Suzimo said. "Let's find the location of the Nether God's life-death soul." The three descended from the sky and walked into the shattered remains of the sect. Behind Suzimo, the traceless compass continued to spin, pointing the way forward. At last, they reached the back mountain of the Nether God realm. "It seems the life-death soul is here," Suzimo said. The traceless compass guidance had also stopped at this place. "Could it be beneath the mountain?" asked the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. For there was no trace of the soul's aura atop this peak. "Move the mountain!" the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign shouted. The entire rear mountain began to shake violently. Rumbling echoes rolled through the land. The peak trembled as the saint lifted his hands. With a single motion, he raised the entire mountain. He bore it on his back, took a step forward, and his vast power radiated outward, moving the massive peak aside. But beneath the mountain, there was nothing, only a stretch of flat earth. The group frowned slightly. "Where has the Nether God hidden his life-death soul?" "Young Master Su, are you sure your compass isn't wrong?" Even the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign sounded uncertain. Suzimo shook his head. The traceless compass never erred. Even remnants of ancient gods could not hide from his detection, let alone the soul of a Saint Sovereign. Suzimo raised his hand, and a sharp blade aura slashed out. The blade's direction was aimed straight at the mountain the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign had just moved. When the strike landed, no explosion followed. Instead, a pained cry echoed. The mountain shimmered between light and shadow, as if it had gained consciousness and tried to flee. "So that's it," Suzimo smiled. He turned his own life-death soul into a mountain, standing right here in the Nether God realm. Who would have guessed? If not for traceless compass guidance, even passing by this place, Suzimo would have seen nothing but an ordinary peak. Indeed, the most dangerous places are often the safest. The mountain-shaped soul tried to escape, but the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign would never allow it. The radiant mist around him spread wide, sealing the surrounding void. "Nether God, rest in peace," the saint said coldly. "We will not let you be reborn. Let the war with the heavenly court begin with your death, you hound." As he spoke, the radiance around him surged, crashing down on the life-death soul. Although the Nether God could use his soul to revive, resurrection required immense time and cost. It was no easy feat. Now, as the soul was utterly annihilated, the Nether God's final scream faded into nothingness. "A pity for this land," said Moonlight Fairy softly. "From now on, it'll be cheap spoil for the Poison Sovereign." Beneath the Nether God realm lay land rich with power, cultivated over thousands of years, a treasure ground fit for founding a sect. This would be a fine place for your violet mist holy lands, Suzumo said with a faint grin. After all, you can't go back now. The heavenly courts likely sealed it off. Forget it. The saint shook his head. I plan to leave the god-fiend abyss heaven anyway. Founding another sect has no meaning. He had once created the violet mist holy lands out of youthful pride. Back then, he was a peerless talent, rejecting all powers who sought to recruit him, and aimed to build a force capable of standing against the heavenly court itself. Now, looking back, the will to contend for supremacy was gone. The three left Myriad Poison Mountain and rested for several days in Moonlight City. During that time, Moonlight Fairy's injuries mostly healed. Then, they used the teleportation formation to head toward the Lotus Pathway. My friends, the road ahead may bring another fierce battle, Moonlight Fairy said, her gaze turning toward Suzumo. Let's hope we can face it together. This time, young Master Su, please don't vanish halfway through. Am I that kind of person? Suzumo laughed. I left to find the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign, not because I feared the heavenly court. The three stepped into the teleportation formation. As powerful energy tore through space and time, their figures vanished from Moonlight City. Time-space travel was dull beyond measure. None spoke. Each focused on their cultivation. Suzumo spent the time exploring the memories left behind by the previous Infernal Lord. Those memories held countless secrets, things long buried by history, unknown to the world, lost beneath the sands of time. On the third day of crossing, a thunderous explosion suddenly erupted within the void. The fabric of space itself trembled as though it would tear apart. Spatial turbulence? Asked the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. That shouldn't be possible, Moonlight Fairy said uncertainly. Though I rarely travel to the Lotus Pathway, the teleportation formation is very stable. It's never encountered turbulence before. Then someone must be attacking the formation, Suzumo said calmly, opening his eyes and rising to his feet. The heavenly court? Both the Saint and Moonlight Fairy reached the same conclusion. How could they find us? During spatial transit, their location changed every second across the currents of time. For the heavenly court to stand for 1 billion years across the 9 heavens, this kind of tracking is hardly surprising, Suzumo said evenly. Since they've already found us, we might as well meet them head-on. Interference during transit was dangerous. Once coordinates were disturbed, not only would the teleportation to the Lotus Pathway fail, they might be flung to an unknown world altogether. Thus, they had no choice but to exit. Tearing through the void, the trio emerged into a barren desert. Above them, a blazing sun burned fiercely. Beneath their feet, endless sandstorms swept the horizon. A few vultures circled and cried in the distance. No matter what happens next, warned the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign. If the fight turns against us, we scatter and regroup at the Lotus Pathway. He had already planned their retreat. Whoever is attacking us, show yourself, Moonlight Fairy called out sharply. How do you like this burial ground I've chosen for you? Boomed a rough voice as the earth itself seemed to quake. They turned to see an old man standing atop a nearby dune, fishing rod in hand, fishing in the middle of a desert. Absurd, yet the man looked perfectly at ease. He wore a wide bamboo hat, his weathered face marked by deep lines of wind and time. May we know your name? The Violet Mist Saint Sovereign asked. Just call me the Burier of Bones, the old man said with a grin. You're with the heavenly court? No, the man replied lightly. But I owe that old holy progenitor a favor. Burying you will settle that debt. Suzumo's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the old man. In the memories left by the previous Infernal Lord, yes, there was mention of such a being. Undying Sage Monarch? Suzumo spoke the name aloud. The old man looked startled for a moment, then laughed. Interesting. Someone still remembers me. Who is that? Asked both the Violet Mist Saint Sovereign and Moonlight Fairy, their faces puzzled. They had never heard of such a name.